At my wife's memorial dinner, my daughter said, "Dad, don't embarrass us tonight." Then my son-in-law's mother sat in my wife's chair at the head of the table. "Some men grow old without realizing their time is over," she said. Everyone laughed. A moment later, my daughter handed me a gift box. "It's a hearing aid, Dad. Make sure you wear it all the time." But then my granddaughter leaned close and whispered, "Grandpa, don't put it on." I overheard a cruel scheme. The color drained from my face. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. Before we go any further, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had to question someone you trusted completely? Yes or no? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs today. Quick note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling. What truly matters is the message and lesson it carries. I sat at the kitchen end of my own dining table while a woman I'd met twice told my daughter I no longer belonged at the head. Old people should know when they're no longer appropriate at the main table. Irene Prescott announced, her voice carrying that particular volume reserved for statements meant to sound like wisdom. She was 66, Clayton's mother, and she'd orchestrated this seating arrangement with the confidence of someone who'd staged similar performances before. Estelle, my daughter, 39, pharmaceutical sales executive, said nothing. She placed a hand on my shoulder and leaned close. "Dad, just bear with it. Don't embarrass me." I was 70 years old. I'd spent 32 years at Boeing finding hidden faults in aircraft systems before they became catastrophic. I'd assembled thrust control systems for the first 747 back when precision meant the difference between flight and failure. Today, September 14th, what would have been Lorraine's 74th birthday, I sat near my own kitchen door, while strangers occupied the dining room she'd chosen our furniture for. Lorraine. The hydrangeas she'd planted 40 years ago were blooming outside the window, purple and blue against the fence. We'd buried her 3 weeks ago. The house still smelled like her lavender sachets in the linen closet, Earl Grey in the cabinet. This memorial meal had been Estelle's idea. A celebration of Mom's life, she'd called it. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly celebration would become theater. Clayton Prescott, Artum. My son-in-law and corporate finance executive stood at conversation edges with the detachment of someone calculating returns. We'd met perhaps a dozen times in 8 years. Stanley, his father, 68, made comments about property values in Myers Park, while Clayton nodded. Lark, my 11-year-old granddaughter, sat beside me with the watchful stillness of children who've learned to read dangerous weather in adult voices. She'd barely touched her food. The meal progressed with mechanical pleasantry. Irene praised the roast I'd spent 3 hours preparing. Stanley mentioned that Lorraine had always been quite the hostess. Estelle moved through the gathering with practiced grace, her smile bright and hollow, as stage lighting steering conversation away from anything resembling actual grief, I observed. Engineers are trained to watch systems under stress, identify points of failure before they cascade. Something was wrong with this equation. The memorial meal for Lorraine, the woman who'd filled this house with 48 years of marriage, was being weaponized into something else entirely. I felt it in how Irene kept referencing Estelle's childhood home, as if possession were retroactive, in how Clayton stood measuring rooms with his eyes, in Estelle's repeated insistence that I not make a fuss. Lorraine would have hated this, the hydrangeas she planted 40 years ago, blooming outside while strangers dismantled her husband's dignity inside. After the meal, we moved to the living room. This was when the real performance began. Estelle produced a wrapped box from her purse, expensive paper, perfect bow. "Dad, I got you something. With Mom gone, we need to make sure you're taking care of yourself." She placed the box in my hands with theatrical gentleness, then wrapped her arm around my shoulder in a gesture that looked like affection, but felt like positioning for an audience. "You're getting old," she said loud enough for the room to hear. "Don't try to pretend you're okay. We all see it." I opened the box. Inside a hearing aid. Top-of-the-line model. Small, flesh-colored, discreet. I started. Dad. Her voice had that edge I remembered from her teenage years, the one that meant contradiction would cost. You asked me to repeat things 3 times last month. Just wear it. For me. For Mom's memory. Irene leaned forward, hands clasped. Such a thoughtful daughter. You're lucky to have her, Theodore. Stanley nodded. Estelle's always been considerate about elder care. Very important. Clayton said nothing, but his expression carried approval. The kind executives give presentations that confirm their projections. I looked at the hearing aid. My hearing was fine. At my last physical, Dr. Morrison had tested it normal for my age, nothing requiring intervention. But Estelle was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not concern, something sharper. Thank you, I said. You need to understand something about engineers. We're trained to observe system failures before they become catastrophic. We don't ignore anomalies. We document them. We wait for patterns to emerge. This was an anomaly. Estelle smiled, the bright professional smile she used for difficult clients. I'll help you put it in. Make sure it fits right. Her hands were gentle as she inserted the device, but something in her movement felt rehearsed. The hearing aid settled into my ear canal with surprising comfort. Expensive equipment always fits better. How's that feel? She asked. Fine, I said. Good. She squeezed my shoulder. Wear it all the time. Okay, especially when you're alone. The audiologist said consistent use helps your brain adjust. Irene was still watching with that sanctimonious expression. Estelle takes after Lorraine. Such devotion. The comparison to my wife to Lorraine, who'd spent 48 years building this home with quiet strength and genuine care, made something tighten in my chest. But I said nothing. Lark had been silent through the entire performance. She sat on the couch edge, small hands folded in her lap, eyes moving between her mother and grandmother, with that careful attention children develop when the adults around them are lying. Then her hand found mine under the table. Her fingers squeezed once, hard. I looked at her. She looked back with eyes that held something I couldn't quite read. Not sympathy. Something darker. More knowing. Later I would understand. That squeeze meant Grandpa, something is very wrong. But in that moment with a hearing aid I didn't need inserted into my ear by a daughter who suddenly felt like a stranger with in-laws measuring my home like prospective buyers, I thought Lark was just uncomfortable with adult awkwardness. I thought wrong. The Prescotts left around 4. Estelle kissed my cheek with professional warmth. Remember, wear it all the time. It'll help. I will, I promised. Lark's hand tightened on mine one final time before her mother called her to the car. She looked up at me with those 2 old eyes, and I saw it clearly now, not sympathy. Warning! The door closed. The house fell silent. Lorraine's hydrangeas swayed in the September breeze outside, purple and blue and unbearably beautiful. I sat in my chair, not the head of my own table, but the kitchen end, and felt the hearing aid warm against my ear canal. Something was very wrong, and my 8-year-old granddaughter had recognized it before I did. After everyone left, Lark sat beside me in the quiet house and asked a question that would unravel everything. Grandpa, why does Mom always ask you the same things in the same order? I turned to look at her. She was curled on the couch, small hands folded in her lap, watching me with those 2 observant eyes. What do you mean? I asked. She always asks the same questions. Every single time. Lark counted on her fingers. What day is it? Grandpa, did you eat? Did you take your medicine? Always that order. Always those words. I felt something cold settle in my chest. How long have you noticed this? Since Grandma died. Maybe before. She tilted her head. Is that normal? It feels like when teachers make us practice for tests. In 32 years at Boeing, I'd learned that repetitive behavior following a pattern means there's a script. A script means there's a purpose. And purpose in engineering systems always serves someone's agenda. Does she hold her phone when she asks these questions? I said. Lark nodded. Always. Like she's checking something or recording. There it was, the variable I'd been missing. "Thank you for telling me," I said. She looked at me with an expression far older than 8 years should contain. "Are we in trouble?" "No," I said. "We're going to be fine." I didn't know if that was true. But Lark needed to hear it, and I needed to believe it. She stayed another hour drawing in the living room, while I pretended to read. Around 8:30, Clayton arrived to pick her up. He didn't come inside, just honked from the driveway. Lark hugged me at the door. "Be careful, Grandpa," she whispered. "Always am," I said, but I hadn't been. Not careful enough. I waited until 11 o'clock. The house was silent except for the old furnace cycling through its evening routine. I locked the front door, turned off the living room lights, and walked out to the garage workshop. Lorraine had called it my sanctuary. 20 years of collected tools on pegboard walls, a workbench. Lorraine's father had built in 1952, the smell of machine oil and sawdust. This was where I'd restored the dining room chairs, rebuilt the fence gate, spent Saturday mornings maintaining the precision that had once kept aircraft systems from failing at 30,000 feet. I set the hearing aid on the workbench under the magnifying lamp. You need to understand what Boeing taught me about systems analysis. Nothing repeats without reason, and reason always serves someone's agenda. Estelle's scripted questions. The hearing aid I didn't need. The public performance of filial devotion. The Prescotts measuring my home like prospective buyers. System components under stress. I just needed to find the fault. I pulled on my work glasses, the ones with the magnification lenses I'd used for blueprint inspection. Clicked on the magnifying lamp. The hearing aid sat in the bright circle of light, small and flesh-colored and innocent. I used a jeweler's screwdriver from the precision set, the kind designed for aircraft instrumentation. The hearing aid case split open with a soft click. What I saw made my hands go still. Right side, a wireless microphone. Professional grade, not the cheap consumer version you'd find in actual hearing aids. Active green LED battery-powered transmitting. Left side GPS tracker the size of a quarter. Same active status, same battery power. Center an antenna array that had nothing to do with sound amplification and everything to do with signal transmission. I picked up my phone and photographed it from 4 angles. Documented the model numbers visible on the circuit board. Checked the battery lithium-ion rated for 72 hours continuous operation. Lorraine's magnifying glass. The same one I'd used for 40 years, grading aircraft blueprints. Now revealed my daughter had turned me into a surveillance target in my own home. This wasn't paranoia. This was surveillance. And I'd been wearing it for 6 hours. I sat back on the workshop stool, hearing aid components spread across the bench, and did what I'd been trained to do, trace the fault back to its source. Estelle had given me this device. She'd insisted I wear it constantly, especially when alone. She'd scripted questions designed to test cognitive function, date recall, meal memory, medication, compliance. She'd recorded my answers. Someone was listening. Someone was tracking. Someone was building a case. For what? The answer arrived with the cold clarity of a system failure finally identified: guardianship. They were documenting incompetence, creating evidence that I couldn't care for myself, building a legal case to take control of my assets, my home, my life. Lorraine's house. The one we'd bought in 1974 for $38,000, now worth over $1 million in Myers Park's market. The Boeing pension. The life insurance payout. The stocks we'd accumulated over 48 years of careful saving. They weren't concerned about me. They were preparing to acquire me. I looked at the disassembled hearing aid under the lamp. The microphone's green LED blinked steadily, still transmitting to somewhere, someone. I could disable it. Snap the antenna, pull the battery, destroy the evidence. But that would tell them I knew. And in aviation engineering, when you discover a trap, you don't disable it immediately. You use it to trace back to the person who set it. You document the fault. You gather evidence. You wait for the system to reveal its full architecture before you report the failure. I picked up the jeweler's screwdriver and carefully reassembled the hearing aid. Every component back in place. Every screw tightened to the exact torque. The case snapped shut with the same soft click it had made opening. The green LED still blinked through the plastic casing, still transmitting, still tracking. Perfect. I set the hearing aid back down on the workbench. I didn't remove the battery. I didn't disable the transmission. In 32 years at Boeing, I'd found 47 hidden faults before they became catastrophic. I knew the protocol: when you discover a trap, you don't spring it. You use it to trace back to whoever set it. This was fault number 48, and I had 3 days before I needed to make my next move. The next morning, I put the hearing aid back in my ear, poured my coffee, and spoke aloud to my empty kitchen. What day is today? Tuesday? No, must be Wednesday. It was Thursday, September 15th. I knew exactly what day it was. The hearing aid sat warm in my ear canal, its green LED blinking invisibly inside the plastic casing, transmitting every word to whoever was listening. Good. Let them hear. I carried my coffee to the living room window. Lorraine's hydrangeas were starting to fade, purple petals browning at the edges. I spoke to them the way elderly men speak to empty rooms. Did I take my blood pressure pill? I think I did. Or was that yesterday? I'd taken it at 7:30 that morning. Same time I'd taken it for the past 15 years. But somewhere, someone was recording this performance, and I needed to make it convincing. You want to know the difference between actual dementia and performance. Dementia is random. Performance has patterns, and patterns leave traces. I spent 3 days building those patterns. Controlled confusion, technically precise. Wrong day references, always 1 day off, never 3. Medication questions posed at specific intervals. Mild memory lapses about meals, never about people. The kind of cognitive decline that sounds concerning in audio clips, but leaves documentary evidence: prescription bottles with correct dosages, calendar entries matching actual dates, bank statements showing methodical bill payments, proving I was acting. Estelle called 3 times a day. Always the same schedule: 9 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 7 in the evening. Always the same script. Dad, what day is it today? Thursday, I think, or Friday. Did you eat breakfast? I had something. Toast, maybe. I'd had oatmeal with blueberries. Same thing I'd eaten every Thursday for 40 years. But I answered vaguely, leaving room for interpretation, giving her the confused elder man performance she was recording. Did you take your medicine? The blue pill or the white one? Your blood pressure medication, Dad. Oh yes, I think so. Call 7 on day 3. Same questions, same concerned tone, same pauses I could hear in the background, the soft click of a recording app, starting the slight echo that meant speakerphone. She thought she was recording evidence. She was, just not the evidence she thought. Because while Estelle recorded her scripted calls on her device, I recorded them on mine. Legal in North Carolina, one-party consent state. My recordings had timestamps, metadata call, duration logs. They showed the pattern. They proved the script. They documented that a pharmaceutical sales executive was conducting systematic cognitive testing on her elderly father while he wore a surveillance device she'd given him. At Boeing, we called this counter-documentation. When you discover someone's building a false case against you, you don't just defend, you build a better case, proving they're lying. On the 3rd day, September 17th, my phone rang at 8:30 in the evening. Outside the script. Different time. That meant something had changed. Hi, Grandpa. Lark's voice was careful, quiet. Hey, sweetheart, how was your day? Good. We learned about butterflies in science. We talked about monarchs and migration patterns for 5 minutes. Normal grandfather-granddaughter conversation. Then her voice dropped lower. Grandpa, I was playing in the hallway today, near Mom's bedroom. Okay. She was on the phone with Grandma Irene. I didn't mean to listen, but they were talking about you. I sat very still. What did they say? Something about audio files. And someone named Grayson. Mom said, She said he needs 2 more weeks of audio before something can proceed. Lark was my inadvertent reconnaissance agent, young enough to be overlooked, but old enough to know something felt wrong. Did they say anything else about this Grayson person? I kept my voice calm, gentle. Just that he's expensive but worth it. And that the recordings are good quality because you wear the thing she gave you, the hearing aid. The surveillance device currently transmitting this entire conversation to whoever was listening. I made a decision. If they were going to hear this, let them hear all of it. Lark, thank you for telling me. That's very helpful information. Are you in trouble? No, honey. But I am going to make sure we're both safe. Can you do something for me? What? If you hear anything else, any other names, any other plans, can you tell me? But don't let your mom know you're listening. Like a spy. Her voice brightened slightly. Exactly like a spy, but a very careful one who doesn't take risks. Okay, I can do that. We said goodnight. I love you. Sweet dreams. All the normal things grandparents say to grandchildren. Then I hung up and wrote the name on the notepad beside the phone. Grayson, an attorney. Had to be. Expensive but worth it. And audio files. And proceed in the same sentence meant legal action. And 2 more weeks of audio meant they were building a case that required documented evidence of cognitive decline over time. Guardianship petition. That was the end game. Record me sounding confused for 30 days, present the audio to a judge, argue that I couldn't care for myself, couldn't manage my finances, couldn't make medical decisions, needed a legal guardian to protect me from my own declining faculties. And who would that guardian be? Estelle, my devoted daughter. The one who'd given me the hearing aid out of loving concern. The one who called 3 times a day to check on me. The one who'd performed filial devotion so perfectly at Lorraine's memorial that even her in-laws had praised her. The one who would then gain control of Lorraine's house, the Boeing pension, the life insurance payout, the accumulated assets of 48 years of marriage. I sat in the quiet living room, hearing aid blinking warm against my ear canal, and felt something cold and certain settle in my chest. At Boeing, we had a principle about system faults. When a problem has a name, you can trace its origin. When it has a name and a timeline, you can predict its endgame. Grayson, 2 weeks, legal proceeding. The trap was visible now. Not just the surveillance device in my ear, but the entire architecture of the conspiracy. And they'd made a critical error. They'd let an 8-year-old overhear the timeline. I looked at the name written on my notepad. Grayson. I had 2 weeks to find out who he was and what he was building. And then I was going to dismantle it piece by piece. 2 days after I learned Grayson's name, Constance Fairbanks knocked on my door at 7 in the morning, holding her phone like evidence at a crime scene. Constance was 74, my neighbor of 12 years, and retired nurse with 3 decades at Meadowbrook Nursing Facility. She stood at my door with the rigid posture of someone who'd witnessed something they couldn't unknow. I need to show you something, she said. And you need to see it before you do anything else today. I'd been about to leave for my Tuesday morning coffee run, same routine I'd followed for years, same diner, same order. Constance knew my schedule. Everyone on the street did. Come in, I said. She walked straight to my kitchen table and set her phone down with deliberate care. I was gardening by the fence this morning. 6:30. You'd just left for coffee. Okay. Your son-in-law arrived 10 minutes after you did. He used a key. He went inside. Something cold moved through my chest. Clayton was here. Watch. She pressed play. The video started with a view from Constance's side yard, my driveway visible through the fence gap, my front door centered in frame. Timestamp 6:47 a.m. Clayton's Mercedes pulled into the driveway. He got out, looked both ways down the street with the careful attention of someone checking for witnesses, then walked to my front door. He produced a key from his pocket. My spare key. The one I'd given Estelle years ago for emergencies. He unlocked my door and went inside. Constance had kept recording. The video showed my closed front door for 18 minutes. Then Clayton emerged carrying nothing visible, got in his car, and drove away. That's not all, Constance said. She swiped to another video. I moved to your back window, the one by your desk. This footage showed Clayton through my home office window. He was rifling through the medicine cabinet in my bathroom, visible through the adjoining door. His phone came out. He photographed every prescription bottle, every label, every dosage instruction. Then he moved to my desk, photographed the financial documents I'd left there, bank statements, investment accounts, property tax bills. Everything organized in Lorraine's filing system, everything now documented by Clayton's camera. Finally, he pulled a tape measure from his pocket. I watched the video 3 times, my son-in-law's hands rifling through the medicine cabinet Lorraine had organized 40 years ago, touching things that weren't his to touch, measuring spaces that weren't his to measure. He measured the bedroom doorway, Constance said quietly. Then the hallway width, then the bathroom entrance. Why would he measure my bedroom? Constance's expression went very still. I was a nurse for 30 years. I worked intake at Meadowbrook. I know what a pre-placement assessment looks like. A what? They're measuring you for a nursing home the way you'd measure furniture for a moving truck. Doorway width for wheelchair access. Hallway clearance for transport gurneys. Bathroom dimensions for assisted care modifications. She paused. And they photograph your medications so they know what to continue when you're admitted. They photograph your finances so they know what assets to liquidate to pay for your care. The surveillance device in my ear suddenly felt heavier, warmer, more present. This is reconnaissance, I said. You need to understand what it means when someone measures your bedroom while you're away. They're not planning to move your furniture. They're planning to move you. Professional reconnaissance, Constance confirmed. The kind attorneys require before filing guardianship petitions. They need to prove you can't live independently and demonstrate they have appropriate placement ready. Your son-in-law just documented both. I sat down at the kitchen table. The hearing aid felt like it was burning against my ear canal. Somewhere someone was listening to this entire conversation. Good. Let them know I had video evidence now. Let them know their reconnaissance had been recorded. How long have you lived next door? I asked Constance. 12 years. I moved here after I retired from Meadowbrook. Why are you showing me this? Her hands tightened on the phone. Because I know what this looks like. I've seen it happen once before. Last time I didn't do anything. This time I won't stay silent. What happened last time? A family brought their father to Meadowbrook. Lovely man, 78, recently widowed. His daughter said he had dementia. Said he couldn't manage his medications. Said he'd wandered away from home twice and gotten lost. She paused, looking at her hands. I've seen this pattern before, she said. Once at Meadowbrook, I watched a family use the same playbook, manufactured audio isolation guardianship. I reported it. It was too late. She paused. I won't stay silent this time. Constance continued. No plaques, no tangles, no vascular damage. His brain was normal for his age, but by then it didn't matter. His daughter had inherited everything and he was gone. You think that's what's happening here? I said. I know it is. Constance set her phone on my kitchen counter and met my eyes. I worked at Meadowbrook for 15 years. I know exactly which facility they're planning to use, and I know what happened to the last person who went there against their will. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. The man's name was on the guardianship petition, she said, along with the attorney who filed it. What was the attorney's name? Constance looked at me with something like grief. Grayson, she said. Grayson Sheffield. Same one who's building your case right now. I called my son at 2 a.m. because some conversations can't wait for daylight, and this one had already waited 6 months too long. Beckett Winslow. My 42-year-old son answered his phone with the flat voice of someone who'd been expecting a reckoning, but hoping it would never arrive. Dad, I need to tell you something, I said, and I need you to listen without interrupting. I laid it out in the methodical sequence I'd learned at Boeing's surveillance device in the hearing aid. Clayton's break-in recorded by Constance attorney Grayson Sheffield's name from Lark's intelligence, the previous victim at Meadowbrook, who died after fraudulent guardianship. Every fact, every date, every piece of evidence. When I finished, silence filled the line for so long I thought he'd hung up. "Beckett." "I knew," he said quietly. "Not all of it, but I knew she wanted you in a home." The hearing aid in my ear felt suddenly heavier. "How long have you known—" "July. She called me, asked me to sign guardianship papers as a supportive relative." His voice cracked slightly. "She said you were declining, that you'd gotten confused about medications, that Mom's death had broken something in you. And you believed her." I hesitated. I asked questions. "She got angry, said I was making it harder for everyone." He paused. "Then I found texts on her phone during a visit. Messages with Clayton about facilities, about timelines, about asset liquidation. I confronted her. She said I was misunderstanding, that she was just researching options in case you needed them later." "That was 6 months ago," I said. "I know. You chose to stay quiet." "I was afraid." The words came out ragged. "Afraid if I spoke up, she'd cut me off from Lark completely. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of—" God, Dad, I don't even know what I was afraid of anymore. I just knew I was terrified, and I chose paralysis over protection. I chose wrong. Lorraine once told me that love without courage is just sentiment pretty to look at, useless in a crisis. My son had just confirmed her wisdom. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "Anything. Document everything you know. Every conversation with Estelle. Every text message you saw. Every date you can remember. Write it down tonight while it's fresh." "Okay. And Beckett, this conversation is being recorded. By me legally, and probably by them through this device in my ear. So they know now that you're talking to me. Which means you need to decide right now whether you're going to find that courage Lorraine talked about, or whether you're going to stay paralyzed while they destroy your family." Another long silence. "I'll write everything down," he said. "Tonight. And Dad, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know." "I know," I said. "Now get to work." I hung up and sat in the dark living room, hearing aid transmitting my breathing to whoever was listening. Let them hear my son turning against them. Let them know their conspiracy was developing cracks. Sunday morning, September 21st, I drove to downtown Charlotte to meet Adelaide Frost. Adelaide was 58, elder law attorney, who agreed to meet on a Sunday morning. She greeted me at her office with the precise efficiency of someone who'd dismantled conspiracies like this before. "Show me everything," she said. I laid out the evidence photos of the disassembled hearing aid, Constance's video of Clayton's break-in, Beckett's written statement he'd emailed at 4 that morning, the timeline of Estelle's scripted phone calls with my counter-recordings. Adelaide studied each piece for 30 minutes without speaking. Then she turned to her computer and started searching court records. "Here," she said, turning the monitor toward me. "Guardianship petition filed August 5th. Petitioner Estelle Winslow Prescott. Attorney of record Grayson Sheffield. August 5th. 3 weeks after Beckett had found those texts. While I'd been performing confusion into the surveillance device, they'd already filed the paperwork. "Look at these attachments," Adelaide continued, clicking through documents. "Nursing home admission papers already prepared. Power of attorney signature. You recognize this?" She zoomed in on a signature page. My handwriting. My name. Dated July 7th. That's from Medicare forms Clayton gave me in July. He said it was for insurance updates after Lorraine died. They harvested your signature from legitimate documents and transferred it to POA paperwork, giving them medical and financial authority. She kept clicking. "And the nursing home they've designated is Meadowbrook. Constance worked there," I said. "She told me about a man who died there. Same attorney, same pattern." Adelaide made a note. "We'll need her testimony. This establishes their method. She clicked to another screen, this one showing property records. Now look at this. Sale agreement for your home pending guardianship approval. Buyer is an LLC registered in Delaware. Ownership, she scrolled down. Majority shareholder Stanley Prescott. How do you process the fact that your daughter forged your signature in July to steal your house in October while your son watched it happen from Atlanta? They're going to seize my assets to pay for nursing home care, I said, slowly understanding. Then use those same assets to buy my house. Money laundering through guardianship, Adelaide confirmed. You finance your own dispossession. They liquidate your investments to pay Meadowbrook's fees, then Stanley's LLC purchases your home at below market value using your own money. Clean transfer, no inheritance tax, no suspicion. How much is the house worth? Property tax records show assessed value of $480,000. They've agreed to purchase for $350,000 below market, citing necessary facility care costs. The difference becomes their profit. She clicked to one more screen, but there's something else. Patent registration in your name. 2 aerospace engineering patents pending sale to European company. Transfer date November 1st. Sale price $220,000. I stared at the screen. My Boeing designs. The thrust control modifications I developed in 1989 and finally gotten around to patenting in 2018. I'd been negotiating with a German aerospace firm since June. The guardianship hearing is scheduled for October 14th, Adelaide said quietly. They timed it perfectly. Seize control 3 weeks before the patent sale. Your guardian signs the transfer on your behalf. The money goes into the guardianship estate, which they control. She turned her monitor back toward me, showing the timeline: guardianship hearing October 14th, patent sale November 1st. The real prize wasn't the house, I said. It was what I'd built with 40 years of my mind. Adelaide closed her laptop and looked at me with something like respect. Now we know the full scope, she said, which means now we can fight back. Adelaide filed the emergency motion to preserve assets at 8:47 Monday morning, before the courthouse coffee had finished brewing. I stayed home wearing the hearing aid, speaking occasional confused statements to my empty kitchen, while monitoring my phone. The surveillance device transmitted my performance to whoever was listening. Let them think I was still oblivious, while Adelaide dismantled their conspiracy in real time. At 11:30, my phone buzzed. Text from Adelaide. Judge reviewing now, solid case. In aviation, we called this defensive maneuvering. When you realize the other pilot is hostile, you don't wait to confirm intentions, you change altitude immediately. Adelaide had compiled everything into a 30-page emergency petition, photos of the disassembled hearing aid showing surveillance components, Constance's video of Clayton's reconnaissance break-in, Beckett's sworn statement about Estelle's July recruitment attempt, my counter-recordings proving the scripted cognitive testing, and the forged power of attorney harvested from Medicare forms. The emergency motion requested immediate asset protection under North Carolina elder abuse statute, citing imminent threat of financial exploitation by family members engaged in documented conspiracy to fraudulently obtain guardianship. At 12:45 p.m. my phone rang. Approved, Adelaide said without preamble. 4 hours flat. Your assets are protected under emergency trust. They can't touch anything now. I sat down at the kitchen table, feeling something unclench in my chest. How long does this protection last? Until the October 14th hearing. But here's what they don't know: we just cut off their access before they realized we were moving. They thought they had time. They thought you were a confused old man wearing their listening device and waiting to be processed. What's protected? Everything. The house, the pension, the patent sale proceeds. I established a revocable living trust with you as sole beneficiary and trustee. Stanley Prescott's LLC purchase contract is nullified. The property isn't available for sale. They can't liquidate, can't transfer, can't touch a single dollar without court approval. Relief mixed with something sharper. Tactical satisfaction. We'd moved first. They're going to know something changed, I said. They'll find out Wednesday when Stanley's LLC gets notice that the sale contract is void. By then, we'll have filed our counter-petition. She paused. Theodore, I need to tell you something else. Something I found in court records. The satisfaction evaporated. What? I found something in Stanley's history, Adelaide said. He's done this before. His own mother, 2019. Guardianship Meadowbrook depleted estate. Same attorney Grayson Sheffield. She turned the monitor toward me. I'm pulling the full records, but Theodore Constance Fairbanks was the floor nurse on that case. She saw everything firsthand. We need her testimony, not just the documents. So Sheffield wasn't just an attorney taking a case. He was a specialist. A professional who'd developed a system for manufacturing guardianships and knew how to make them stick. What about the doctor who evaluated Helen? I asked. Dr. Richard Moss, still practicing. We'll need to investigate whether he's complicit or just incompetent. And the nursing home, Meadowbrook Rehabilitation and Memory Care. Same facility. Clayton placed a deposit for your admission. I heard Adelaide clicking through more documents. Here's the interesting part, she said. Meadowbrook's administrative records from 2019. Director of Patient Services listed in the facility footer. She paused. Constance Fairbanks, RN. The kitchen went very quiet. Outside, Lorraine's hydrangeas swayed in the September breeze, brown petals falling. My neighbor hadn't just witnessed the crime. She'd worked in the facility where it happened. She was there, I said quietly. She saw everything. She was probably the anonymous report to APS, Adelaide said, the one that came too late. I understood now why Constance had knocked on my door at 7 in the morning holding her phone like evidence. Why she'd said she'd seen this pattern before and stayed silent. She'd watched Helen Prescott die while Stanley Prescott looted her estate, and she wasn't going to watch it happen again. Adelaide called Wednesday afternoon with a name I'd never forget. Grayson Sheffield. Had 3 dead clients in 18 months, and I was supposed to be number 4. I need you to sit down for this, she said. I was already sitting. The hearing aid in my ear transmitted everything they'd know within minutes we'd discovered their pattern. Tell me, I said. I searched every guardianship petition Sheffield filed in the past 3 years. Found 3 cases with identical structure to yours. Martin Fletcher, 76, petition filed, February 2021. Dorothy Sinclair, 81, August 2021. Robert Hastings, 79, March 2022. What happened to them? Martin Fletcher died 4 months after guardianship. Untreated pneumonia. He complained of respiratory symptoms for 2 weeks before anyone called a doctor. Progressed to septic shock. I felt something cold settle deeper. Dorothy Sinclair died 7 months after placement. Medication errors, heart medication reduced while blood pressure medication increased. Stroke in her sleep. Facility called it natural causes. And Robert Hastings, still alive. Still under guardianship at a memory care facility in Gastonia. His daughter tried to visit last month. Facility said he declined. She filed complaint. Sheffield responded that family visits were medically contraindicated. Ombudsman sided with the guardian. How do you process the fact that the man trying to institutionalize you has already killed 2 people using the exact same legal paperwork? 3 victims, I said, and they got away with it. They got away with it because the victims were silenced before they could fight back. Isolated, cut off from outside contact, trapped in facilities where Sheffield controlled information flow. Adelaide paused. But you're not silenced. And we have something they didn't. Beckett's IP trace. What did he find? The surveillance device transmitted to IP address registered to Sheffield and Associates. Grayson Sheffield was getting real-time transmission of everything you said. Attorney-client privilege doesn't protect conspiracy to commit fraud. So Sheffield had been listening live. Every confused statement I'd performed, every conversation with Lark, every call with Beckett. Good. That meant he'd heard my Sunday conversation with Adelaide. He knew I'd found him, and he'd have to react. Can we contact the other victims' families? I asked. I'm drafting letters tonight. If they'll testify, we establish pattern of predation. Sheffield becomes not just your daughter's attorney, but a serial elder abuser with prosecutable criminal history. We talked strategy for another 20 minutes. When I hung up, the house felt very quiet. The next morning, Estelle called. "Dad, I need to talk to you about Lark's schedule." Her voice had that pleasant, professional tone. The decision was already made. "What about it?" "It's too demanding right now. Soccer practice, tutoring, piano. She needs her weekends at home to rest. I'm sure you understand." I understood perfectly. Lark had overheard the Grayson conversation. Lark had reported it. Lark was 11 and observant and dangerous to their conspiracy. "Can I still call her for good night?" I asked. "Let's give her some space. Growing up means independence. You wouldn't want to hold her back, would you?" The threat was clear: resist, and I'm questioning your judgment, which becomes more evidence for Sheffield's petition. "I want what's best for Lark," I said. "I knew you'd understand. We'll reconnect after things settle down." She hung up. I sat with the phone hearing aid warm against my ear and felt the isolation tightening. No more weekend visits. No more goodnight calls. No more 8-year-old intelligence agent. Estelle was cutting me off from the last family member who knew the truth. That afternoon, I drove to Lark's elementary school. I parked across the street at 2:30 p.m. during recess. The playground was visible through chain-link fence, 20 or 30 children running playing tag. I spotted Lark after 2 minutes. Pink jacket, dark hair in braids, laughing as she chased another girl around the swings. I stood at that fence watching Lark chase her friend across the playground and understood what Estelle was really taking, not just visiting rights, but the last person who'd witnessed me being fully myself. Lark had seen me cook breakfast exactly how she liked it. Had seen me remember her favorite books, her birthday, what made her laugh. Had seen me solve her math homework and fix her broken toy truck. She was the only person who could testify that I wasn't confused or declining. She was my witness to normalcy, and Estelle knew it. I stayed in the shadow of a maple tree far enough back that Lark wouldn't see me close enough to verify she was safe. The GPS watch was still on her wrist. I could see it under her jacket sleeve when she reached for the swing chain. Recess ended at 3 o'clock. Teachers called the children back. The playground emptied in chaos. Lark was one of the last to leave. She'd been playing near the fence line, and as she turned toward the school building, she suddenly stopped. She looked directly at where I was standing, not scanning, looking at me, through the chain link and shadows and maple branches, as if she'd sensed I was there. She stood perfectly still for 3 seconds. Too far to see her expression. Close enough to see her tilt her head slightly, the way she did when thinking. I stepped back deeper into the shadows. Lark's teacher called her name. She turned and ran toward the building, jacket sleeve falling over the GPS watch, braids bouncing. I couldn't let her know I was watching. Not yet. If Estelle discovered I was monitoring the school, she'd move Lark somewhere I couldn't find. Private school, different city. Whatever it took to complete the isolation. I got back in my car and drove home through afternoon traffic, hearing aid, transmitting my breathing to Sheffield's server. Let him hear me drive away. Let him think I'd given up. At 7:30 that evening, I called Lark for our nightly goodnight ritual, and for the first time in 2 years, the phone just rang, and I knew exactly what was happening in that house. 6 rings, voicemail. I hung up and tried again. 7 rings, voicemail. Again. 8 rings, voicemail. Estelle was screening. Or more precisely, Estelle was conducting the first formal coaching session, and Lark couldn't answer because she was being taught what to say about her grandfather, who supposedly couldn't remember what day it was. I'd spent 32 years at Boeing analyzing system failures, and I understood exactly what was happening. They were breaking my granddaughter's trust in reality itself. The worst kind of engineering failure there is. I set the phone on the kitchen table and reconstructed the scene with the precision I'd once used for accident investigation reports. Lark would be in her bedroom. Estelle sitting on the bed beside her. Irene in the chair by the window providing backup authority, the concerned grandmother reinforcing the concerned mother's narrative. They'd start gently. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about Grandpa Theodore." Lark would be confused. She'd just seen me yesterday morning, no 2 days ago now. Time moved differently when you were 8 and scared. We're worried about him, Estelle would say. He's getting old. We think he needs help, professional help. But Grandpa's fine, Lark would protest. Because she'd seen me being fine. She'd seen me remember her favorite breakfast, her stuffed rabbit's name, which books she'd already read, and which ones she wanted next. Honey, sometimes people seem fine, but they're not. Irene's voice sweet as poison. Sometimes we have to help them even when they don't understand they need it. Then the script would begin. The same script they'd used with Helen Prescott in 2019, refined through practice, delivered with the systematic precision of professional manipulation. When the social worker asks about Grandpa, what will you say? Lark would hesitate. She'd look between her mother and grandmother, trying to understand what answer was safe. I'll say, he's okay. No, sweetheart. That's not helpful. We need you to tell the truth about what you've seen. But Lark had seen the truth. She'd seen me competent and present and remembering everything that mattered. She'd seen me solve her math homework, fix her broken toy, sit with her during thunderstorms, because she was afraid, and I remembered that she was afraid. But Grandpa always remembers what I like to eat. Lark would say, voice smaller now. He knows I'm afraid of thunder, and he sits with me. Estelle's voice would turn cold. I'd heard that voice. I knew its edges. Lark, you're being very difficult. Irene would intervene with the weapon that always works on children: weaponized love. If you love your grandpa, you need to help him. What if he falls and no one's there? What if he forgets his medicine and gets very sick? You don't want that, do you? And there it was. The trap that turns protection into betrayal. Tell the truth and you're hurting him. Lie and you're helping him. A child's brain couldn't process that paradox without breaking something fundamental. Lark would cry. I knew she would cry. She cried when she was confused, when things didn't make sense, when adults demanded answers to questions with no safe response. I don't want Grandpa to get hurt, she'd say through tears. Then help us help him. Say it, my grandpa can't take care of himself anymore. You need to understand what it means when a child stops crying mid-sentence and goes silent. It's not compliance, it's dissociation. The mind's emergency shutdown when trauma exceeds processing capacity. Lark would go quiet. Not calm. Quiet. The kind of quiet that meant her brain was protecting her by disconnecting from the moment, floating somewhere safer, while her body stayed in that bedroom, and her mouth repeated words that would destroy her grandfather. My grandpa can't take care of himself anymore. Estelle would smile. Good girl, let's practice some more. I tried calling again at 8 o'clock. Voicemail. 8:30. Voicemail. 8:45. Voicemail. The hearing aid in my ear transmitted my breathing to Grayson Sheffield's server. Let him hear my restraint. Let him hear me not driving to the Prescott residence and breaking down their door to stop what they were doing to a child. I couldn't. If I showed up, if I caused a scene, it became more evidence of erratic behavior, poor judgment, danger to family. Adelaide had been clear we had to wait for the hearing. We had to present our case through proper channels. But proper channels moved slowly, and Lark was being tortured right now. The coaching would continue for an hour, maybe 90 minutes. Repetition until the script was memorized. Reward when she got it right. Coldness when she resisted. By the end, Lark wouldn't be crying anymore. She'd be reciting, performing. The way I'd been performing confusion for their surveillance device, except Lark was 8 and didn't understand yet that performance and reality could separate. She'd think the lies she was telling were somehow true, or she'd think truth was whatever adults told you it was. Either way, they'd succeed in breaking her trust in her own perception. That was the goal. Not just false testimony, broken calibration. A child who no longer trusted her own observations enough to defend them. At 9 o'clock, our usual good night time. The time when for 2 years, Lark had called to tell me about her day, to ask me questions about airplanes or weather, or why the moon changed shapes, my phone stayed silent. I sat in the living room with it in my hand, watching the screen, waiting for her name to appear. It never did. The silence told me everything about how far they were willing to go. They'd cut me off from Lark not because she was busy or tired or growing independent. They'd cut me off because they were breaking her, and broken children don't call their grandparents to report the breaking. Lorraine's hydrangeas outside the window were almost completely brown now. September ending. October approaching. The hearing was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to build our case while they built theirs on the ruins of a child's trust. I set the phone down on the table and made a decision. If they wouldn't let her call me, I'd have to reach her another way. And I'd have to do it before they finished teaching her to testify against me with the same false confidence Estelle used when she'd handed me the surveillance device disguised as concern. The next afternoon, I parked 3 blocks from Lark's school at 2:50 p.m., 10 minutes before dismissal, with a pink GPS watch in my jacket pocket and a 3-minute window before Clayton's car arrived. I'd spent the morning at Best Buy purchasing the watch, marketed for concerned parents tracking young children. What the packaging didn't advertise was the audio recording capability activated by the red emergency button. Press once for GPS location alert. Hold for 3 seconds to begin continuous audio capture uploaded to cloud storage. At Boeing, we called it redundant systems. When one safety mechanism fails, you deploy a backup before catastrophic failure occurs. And that GPS watch was Lark's backup when I couldn't be her primary protection. The school bell rang at 3 o'clock. Children poured through the front doors in the chaotic release of energy that comes from 6 hours of forced stillness. I stood at the gate's edge, not hidden but not conspicuous. Just another grandfather waiting for pickup. Lark emerged with 3 other girls laughing about something. Then she saw me. Her smile died. Not from fear, from understanding. She knew I wasn't supposed to be here. She knew her mother had forbidden contact. "What will you do?" Silence on the line for 10 seconds. "I'm going to find out who's listening," he said finally. "You sent me those device specifications weeks ago. I'm running the IP trace now. In cybersecurity, we call this a zero-day exploit. The moment you realize someone's been inside your system for months, and you have minutes, not hours, to mount a defense." She nodded, taking the watch. Her fingers were small against the band. "They made me say things about you last night," she whispered. "Things that aren't true." My chest tightened. "I know, sweetheart. I didn't want to. Mom and Grandma Irene made me practice over and over. They said if I loved you, I'd help you. Listen to me." I took her hands, watch between our palms. "This watch means I'm always with you, even when I can't be there. Always. If you're scared, if someone says something that feels wrong, if you need me, press the red button. I'll come." She clipped the watch under her jacket sleeve where it wouldn't show. 11 years old and already understanding operational security. "I miss our phone calls," she said. "Me too, but we'll talk again soon, I promise." A car horn. Clayton's Mercedes pulling into the pickup lane. "That's my dad," Lark said. "I have to go." I squeezed her hands once. "Remember red button?" She nodded and ran toward the parking lot, jacket sleeve falling over the watch, hiding it from sight. I walked back to my car before Clayton could see me. Tracking app already open on my phone, showing Lark's location as a pink dot moving toward the Mercedes. The next evening, Beckett arrived unannounced. I heard his car in the driveway at 7 p.m., 4-hour drive from Atlanta without warning. When I opened the door, he looked exhausted. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Of course." We sat in the living room. Beckett on the couch, me in Lorraine's chair. For 20 minutes, we talked about his work, cloud architecture, penetration testing, client projects. Surface conversation that felt like verbal circling before something harder. I asked precise technical questions about zero-trust security models. Remembered protocol details he'd mentioned 6 months ago. Suggested improvements to his authentication workflow. "Your approach to the zero-trust model." Beckett stopped mid-sentence. "Dad, that's exactly what the industry standard recommends. Your mind is completely sharp." "I know." I said. That's why they need manufactured evidence. Real decline wouldn't require surveillance devices and coached testimony. He looked at his hands. I've known something was wrong for months. I just didn't want to believe my sister would. I kept telling myself I was misunderstanding. You found the texts in July, I said. You told me that when I called at 2 in the morning. I found them earlier than that. July, actually. Messages with Clayton about facilities, costs, timelines. I confronted her. She said I was paranoid. I watched my son sit in the same chair where Lorraine used to read to him as a child, and understood she would have been ashamed of the man he'd become smart enough to see injustice, too afraid to stand against it. What will you do? I asked. I don't know. His voice was small. I'm afraid if I take sides, she'll make sure I never see Lark again. She has custody. I have visitation. If she says I'm unstable or a bad influence, she's coaching Lark to testify against me, I said. Right now. Started 2 nights ago. Psychological manipulation. Weaponizing a child's love. Beckett's face went pale. Is Lark okay? No, but I gave her a way to reach me if it gets worse. What way? GPS watch with emergency alert. She can signal if she needs me. Beckett nodded slowly. That's smart. Redundant systems. You taught me that phrase, I said, 2 years ago when you explained your backup protocols. He looked up, surprised. You remember that conversation? I remember every conversation I've had with my children, I said, even the ones where they tell me they're too afraid to help. The words landed hard. Beckett's expression crumpled. I'm sorry, he said. I know that doesn't help. I know you need more than sorry. But I'm scared, Dad. I'm scared of losing Lark completely. I'm scared of Estelle turning her against me. I'm scared I'll make things worse. Fear is reasonable, I said. Paralysis is choice. We sat in silence for a long minute. Adelaide is building the case, I said. Court date is October 14th. If you decide you can testify, let her know. If you can't, I understand. But I need you to understand something too. Your silence helps Estelle. Your neutrality becomes her weapon. Beckett nodded. I know. He left at 9:30. Hugged me at the door, held on longer than normal, then got in his car and drove back toward Atlanta. I stood at the door watching his taillights disappear around the corner, thinking about Lorraine's voice from years ago. The most dangerous person isn't your enemy, it's someone who loves you but lacks the courage to defend you. I finally understood who she'd been warning me about. Not Estelle, who'd chosen to be an enemy. Beckett, who'd chosen to be afraid. Estelle called Beckett at 9 a.m. the morning after he'd driven back to Atlanta, and the warmth that had masked her previous invitations was completely gone. I know this because Beckett called me immediately afterward, his voice shaking in a way I hadn't heard since he was 12, and broke Lorraine's favorite lamp. She's not asking anymore, he said. She's threatening. What did she say? That if I don't sign the guardianship support papers, the court will see a son who refuses to help his declining father get proper care. That my absence from the petition looks like family dysfunction. That I'm obstructing your welfare. I understood the tactic immediately. Estelle was converting Beckett's neutrality into evidence of my incompetence. If my own son wouldn't sign it, must be because he knew I was beyond help and felt guilty about it. She said there's no more time, Beckett continued. The hearing is October 14th. Either I'm helping you or hurting you. Then she hung up before I could respond. What will you do? Silence on the line for 10 seconds. I'm going to find out who's listening, he said finally. You sent me those device specifications weeks ago. I'm running the IP trace now. In cybersecurity, we call this a zero-day exploit. The moment you realize someone's been inside your system for months and you have minutes, not hours, to mount a defense. Be careful, I said. If Estelle suspects you're helping, I know, but I can do this without her knowing. Network analysis packet routing. I'll know where your surveillance device transmits by end of day. He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand, hearing aid transmitting my breathing to whoever was listening. Let them hear my son starting to fight back. But they were escalating too. I wouldn't learn about that afternoon until later. Wouldn't know my granddaughter sat surrounded by 3 adults who'd reduced her to weapon and target simultaneously, but the GPS watch I'd given her was recording every word. September 28th, 3 o'clock. Prescott residence living room. Lark on the couch. Estelle sitting beside her. Irene in the chair across. And for the first time, Clayton pulled up a chair directly in front of Lark, forming a triangle of adult authority around an 8-year-old. The audio started mid-sentence. Needs to understand what happens if she doesn't help. Clayton's voice. Calm. Reasonable. The tone he probably used in corporate finance meetings when explaining why layoffs were necessary. Lark, your grandfather is sick. If you don't help us help him, he'll be taken somewhere bad. Somewhere you'll never see him again. Do you want that? Lark's voice small and frightened. No, but Grandpa isn't sick. Sweetheart, we've been over this, Irene. Sweet poison again. Your mother and I have seen things you haven't noticed. The forgetting, the confusion. He needs professional care. He doesn't forget. Lark's voice rising defensive. He remembers my favorite foods, my favorite color, that I'm scared of thunder. Lark. Estelle's voice cut through like ice. Say exactly what we taught you, right now, or this is your fault. Silence on the recording. 5 seconds. 10. Then Lark, crying. Not the performative crying of a child trying to avoid punishment. The broken sobbing of a mind overloaded with conflicting demands. Love your grandfather. Betray your grandfather. Protect him by destroying him. Tell the truth by lying. I can't, Lark said through tears. I can't say he's sick when he's not. It's not true. Truth is what helps people, Clayton said. And right now, helping your grandfather means saying the words we taught you. And if you don't, Estelle's voice went colder. They'll send him away anyway. But it will be worse. He'll be alone, scared, confused, and you could have prevented it. The cruelty was precise. Weaponizing a child's protective instinct, turning her love into a mechanism for compliance. Say it, Irene prompted. My grandfather can't take care of himself. Lark's crying intensified. Say it, Estelle repeated. On the recording, a soft rustling sound. Movement. Then Lark's voice barely audible. My grandfather, he can't. Can't what? Clayton pushed. More rustling. The sound of fabric moving. Then silence except for Lark's ragged breathing. I listened to that recording at 11 p.m. and I pulled the GPS watch's cloud storage to check if Lark was safe. Heard my granddaughter being systematically broken. Heard 3 adults converting a child's love into a weapon against the person she loved. And I heard the moment when Lark's hand moved. The rustling on the recording was her left arm dropping below the table edge. Her fingers finding the GPS watch, hidden under her jacket sleeve. The soft scraping sound was her fingernail against the watch face finding the raised edge of the red emergency button. She hadn't pressed it, but she'd found it. Lark, answer your father, Estelle said. Can't what? The recording captured Lark's finger resting on that button. I could hear it in the slight change in audio quality, her wrist position shifting, the watch's microphone angle adjusting. She was considering it, weighing whether this moment qualified as emergency, whether pressing would help or make things worse. Can't take care of himself, Lark finally whispered. Louder, Clayton demanded. Can't take care of himself. Stronger now, defeated. Good, Estelle said. Now let's practice the rest. The recording continued for another 20 minutes. Script repetition. Corrections when Lark's phrasing wavered. Rewards when she recited perfectly. Through it all, the occasional rustling sound. Lark's finger returning to that button, touching it, considering. Not pressing. Not yet. When the recording ended at 3:47 p.m., I sat in my darkened living room with my phone in my hand and understood we were approaching breaking point. Lark's finger had rested on the button's smooth surface, tears streaming down her face as 3 adults waited for her scripted lies. One press and I would know. One press and everything would accelerate. She hadn't pressed it yet, but her finger hadn't moved away either. At 3:47 p.m. on September 29th, my phone vibrated with an alert I'd been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. SOS, GPS watch activated. The screen showed Lark's location pinned to the Prescott residence. Below it, emergency alert. Respond immediately. Lark had pressed the button. 8 years old, surrounded by adults coaching her to betray me, and she'd found the courage to signal for help. I dialed 911 before my hands stopped shaking. 911? What's your emergency? My 8-year-old granddaughter just activated an emergency GPS alert. Location 847 Oakmont Drive. There's an active elder abuse guardianship case. My attorney is Adelaide Frost. Case number should be in your system. I need officers at that address immediately. The dispatcher's voice shifted from routine intake to focused urgency when I mentioned guardianship fraud, and Adelaide's named someone who recognized this wasn't a family misunderstanding. Sir, I'm showing the case number. Officers are being dispatched now. What is your relationship to the child? I'm her grandfather, Theodore Winslow. Mr. Winslow, do not enter the residence until officers arrive. Do you understand? I understand. I was already grabbing my car keys. Sir, I need verbal confirmation you will wait for officers. I'll wait, I said, but I was already walking to the car. At Boeing, we had a protocol: when the alert system goes active, you have seconds to respond, not minutes. Analysis happens after you've acted, not before. You need to understand what an SOS alert means to an engineer. It's not a request for help, it's a declaration that system tolerance has been exceeded and catastrophic failure is imminent. Lark had exceeded her tolerance. I drove toward Oakmont Drive, not knowing what emergency awaited. Physical harm, psychological breaking point. Had they discovered the watch? Was she locked in a room, injured, terrified beyond the fear I'd already heard in those recordings? The GPS tracking app showed her location stationary at the Prescott residence. The watch was still active, still transmitting. Traffic on Providence Road moved with the casual pace of late afternoon errands. People going to grocery stores, picking up kids from activities, living normal Wednesday afternoons, while my granddaughter had pressed an emergency button because 3 adults had pushed her past what a child could endure. I took back roads, cut through neighborhoods, exceeded speed limits by amounts that wouldn't trigger attention, but shaved minutes off the route. 15 minutes to Oakmont Drive according to GPS. I needed it to be 5. Every red light felt like an eternity, every green light too brief. The GPS showed 15 minutes to Oakmont Drive, and I'd have driven through hell to cut it to 10. My phone rang. Adelaide. I just got notification from the court system, she said without preamble. Emergency police dispatched to Prescott residence. Is Lark okay? I don't know yet. She activated the SOS alert. I'm driving there now. Theodore, the dispatcher, told you to wait for officers. I'm aware. If you enter that house before police arrive, Estelle will use it as evidence of erratic behavior. Violation of boundaries. Danger to family. Noted. I'm serious. You need to. Adelaide, my granddaughter, pressed an emergency button. I'm going. Silence on the line for 3 seconds. I'll meet you there, she said. 20 minutes. She hung up. I turned onto Queens Road, then into Myers Park proper. Tree-lined streets, houses worth 7 figures, neighborhood where conspiracies dressed as concern and abuse wore the mask of family devotion. Before I tell you what I found at that house, are you still with me? Comment. If you think Lark was physically hurt, or B, if this was psychological torture, and tell me in 5 to 10 words why you chose that. Please note the next part includes some recreated details for narrative purposes, but the message is what matters. Oakmont Drive appeared on my right. I turned, scanning house numbers. 847. Colonial-style brick facade, perfectly manicured lawn. The kind of house that appeared in real estate magazines as aspirational living. A patrol car sat in the driveway, lights off. Professional response, not emergency announcement. They'd arrived before me despite my route cutting and speed. I parked on the street and got out. The hearing aid in my ear transmitted my breathing to Grayson Sheffield's server. Let him hear me arriving at his client's house with police already present. An officer stood in the front door. African-American, early 30s, fit-build hand resting near his service weapon in the casual alertness of someone trained to assess threats. He turned as I approached. "Sir, are you Theodore Winslow?" "Yes." "Officer Damon Reyes, Charlotte Mecklenburg Police. Dispatch said you called about an emergency GPS alert from your granddaughter." "That's correct. Is she safe?" "I've made contact with the family. Child appears unharmed. But I'd like to speak with you before we proceed." He gestured toward the patrol car. "Can you tell me exactly what kind of GPS device we're talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the tracking app. "GPS watch with emergency alert function. I gave it to my granddaughter 3 days ago because I suspected she was being psychologically manipulated as part of a guardianship fraud conspiracy." Officer Reyes's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or the look cops get when a call that seemed simple reveals layers. "Guardianship fraud," he repeated. "Active case with attorney Adelaide Frost. Elder abuse surveillance manufactured evidence of incompetence. My daughter and her in-laws are trying to institutionalize me to gain control of my assets. They've been coaching my granddaughter to provide false testimony. And the GPS alert means my granddaughter reached a breaking point. Means whatever was happening in that house exceeded a child's capacity to endure it. Means I need to see her, now." Officer Reyes studied me for a long moment, calculating, assessing whether I was a concerned grandfather or a delusional old man with persecution complex. Then he nodded toward the house. "Let's go talk to your granddaughter," he said. We walked to the front door together. Officer Reyes knocked professional firm, the sound of authority that doesn't ask permission. The door opened. Estelle stood there, face-pale eyes moving between the officer and me, with the rapid calculation of someone whose careful plan had just encountered an uncontrolled variable. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said. Officer Reyes reached the Prescott door 3 seconds before I did. Through the sidelight window, I could see movement. Estelle's silhouette approaching her posture already defensive. The door opened before Reyes could knock. "Officer, thank goodness," Estelle said, her voice pitched with manufactured relief. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. My father has dementia, and he's become convinced." She didn't finish. Lark appeared behind her, saw me through the gap in the doorway, and everything Estelle had built over 9 months shattered in an instant. "Grandpa," my granddaughter pushed past her mother. Actually pushed her physically, moved Estelle aside and ran to me. She crashed into my chest with enough force that I staggered backward, her thin arms wrapping around my waist. Her face pressed against my shirt. I felt her whole body shaking. "I've got you," I whispered into her hair. "I've got you now." Estelle's face went through a remarkable transformation. The concerned daughter mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath before snapping back into place. "Lark, honey, Grandpa is confused. Remember what we talked about? He needs help." "Ma'am?" Officer Reyes stepped forward, his tone professional but firm. "I need to speak with your daughter, alone. She's 11 years old. I'm her mother. I have a right. You have the right to remain present during questioning if she requests it." Reyes looked down at Lark, who hadn't loosened her grip on me. "Lark, would you like your mother present while we talk?" Lark's arms tightened around me. She shook her head without lifting her face from my chest. Reyes nodded. "Mr. Winslow, would you mind waiting in the living room with Mrs. Prescott while I speak with Lark in the kitchen?" The last thing I wanted was to let her go. But this was necessary. Reyes needed to hear it from her without Estelle's presence poisoning the air. I gently loosened Lark's arms. "It's okay. Officer Reyes is going to help us. I'll be right in the next room." She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and terrified. Then she nodded. I watched Reyes guide her toward the kitchen, his hand gentle on her shoulder. Then I turned to face my daughter. Estelle and I stood in her tastefully decorated living room. The cream furniture, the artfully arranged family photos that told a story of stability and love and said nothing. What was there to say? She knew I knew. I knew she knew I knew. There's a particular silence that exists between people who've just realized they're on opposite sides of an unbridgeable divide. It has weight, texture. It fills the space between you like something solid, something you could touch if you reached out your hand. We stood in that silence for 12 minutes. When Reyes emerged with Lark, his expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the tightness around his eyes. Whatever she'd told him, it was enough. "Mr. Winslow, I'd like you to take Lark home with you tonight," he said. "Mrs. Prescott, I'll need you to come to the station to answer some questions." Estelle's voice went sharp. "On what grounds my father called in a false report? Because he's mentally unstable. Ma'am, your daughter has made some serious allegations. We need to investigate them fully." Reyes's tone remained professional, but there was steel underneath. "You're not under arrest, but we do need to talk." Lark's hand found mine. I squeezed it gently. 20 minutes later, I was back in my car with Lark buckled into the passenger seat. She hadn't spoken since leaving the house. I didn't push. The GPS watch was still on her wrist. I'd check it later, once she was settled, once I knew she felt safe. We were halfway home when she finally broke the silence. "Grandpa, am I in trouble?" "God, no." I reached over and squeezed her knee. "You're not in trouble. You did exactly the right thing. Mom said if I ever told anyone, they wouldn't believe me. She said they'd think I was making it up because I was attention-seeking. Officer Reyes believed you." "Did you?" Her voice was so small. "When I first told you, did you believe me?" I pulled into my driveway and turned to face her. "From the very first moment, I've never doubted you for a single second." She started crying. Then the real kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and painful. I unbuckled her seatbelt and pulled her across the center console into my arms, and she sobbed into my shoulder while I held her and promised her over and over that she was safe now. Inside, I got her settled on the couch with hot chocolate and her favorite blanket. Then I went into my study and carefully removed the GPS watch from her wrist. She didn't ask why. Maybe she'd forgotten it was even there. I pulled up the companion app on my phone, navigating to the audio recording feature. The watch had been recording continuously since 3:47 p.m. when the SOS alert triggered. I scrolled back to 3:19 p.m. right when Beckett must have left. I pressed play. Estelle's voice came through clearly. "Let's try that again. What do you say if someone asks why you don't visit Grandpa anymore?" I listened to all 28 minutes. Every coached response. Every scripted reaction. Every moment of psychological torture delivered in a calm, patient, motherly tone. And every word had been automatically backed up to the cloud. I had her. The recording was enough. More than enough. 28 minutes of crystal-clear audio documenting systematic psychological torture of an 11-year-old child by her own mother. I saved 3 copies to different drives, uploaded one to Adelaide's secure server, and at 9:30 p.m. I called Beckett to tell him what we had. He answered on the second ring. "Dad, everything okay?" "We got her," I said, pulling up the audio file on my laptop. The GPS watch recorded everything, every word of the coaching session. "You're serious? You have actual audio?" 28 minutes. I was distracted trying to find the most damning section to send him, and I held my phone too close to the laptop speaker as I scrubbed through the timeline. Just 10 seconds of playback before I realized my mistake and pulled the phone away. But 10 seconds was enough. Lark's voice came through, tiny and desperate. "But Grandpa never forgets things about me. He remembers my birthday and my favorite books," and then Estelle, cold as winter steel. "Lark, you're being very difficult right now. We've talked about this behavior." I heard Beckett's sharp intake of breath through the phone. Then silence. "Beckett!" More silence. then a sound that might have been a sob, or might have been something breaking. Was that? His voice cracked. Dad. Was that Lark? Was that really Lark crying? That was from 3:30 this afternoon. And Estelle. He couldn't finish. I heard something crash in the background, maybe a coffee mug hitting a wall. Oh God. Oh my God. I heard it. I actually heard what she... He'd known intellectually that Estelle was coaching Lark. We'd discussed it. But there's a difference between knowing something and hearing a child's voice shake with fear while her mother systematically dismantles her reality. The difference between schematic and visceral. Beckett, I need you to listen to me. I'm coming to Charlotte. His voice had gone flat, decided. Right now. I'm leaving in 5 minutes. I glanced at the clock. It's 9:30 at night. Tomorrow we can... I heard my niece begging them not to lie about you. I heard Estelle tell a child she's being difficult for defending her grandfather's memory. Something rustled. He was already moving, gathering things. I'm not waiting until tomorrow. I'm not making excuses anymore. I'm not... His voice broke again. Dad, I should have listened to you 3 months ago. I should have believed you when... You're listening now. That's what matters. I'll be there by 1:30, maybe 2 a.m. Drive carefully. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my garage with the laptop screen glowing in the dark, listening to the audio loop through Estelle's coaching script one more time. Every instruction, every threat masked as concern, every moment of calculated cruelty. At 11 p.m. Beckett's car pulled into my driveway, and my son stepped out, looking 10 years older than the man who'd left 3 days earlier. Guilt and determination age you differently than time. He'd made the 4-hour drive in 90 minutes, and I didn't ask about speed limits. We stood in the driveway, saying nothing. Then Beckett's face crumpled, and he pulled me into a hug that felt like an apology and a promise and a plea for forgiveness, all wrapped into one desperate embrace. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't. You're here now. That's enough. We went inside. I played him the full 28 minutes. He sat at my kitchen table with his head in his hands, and when it finished, he looked up at me with red eyes and said, What do you need me to do? Wednesday morning, 9 a.m., Adelaide's office. Bring everything you found on the IP trace. He nodded. We didn't talk about Atlanta or his job or what this choice would cost him. Some decisions don't require discussion. October 1st arrived cool and clear. Adelaide's conference room looked like a war room evidence documentation, spread across the table in organized stacks, each piece labeled and cross-referenced. Adelaide stood at the head of the table with a legal pad, systematically checking off items. Surveillance device with technical specifications proving audio transmission. She tapped the first stack. GPS tracker recovered from Lark's doll serial number, traced to bulk purchase April 2022. 28-minute audio file with timestamps showing coaching session and psychological coercion. Constance's video of Clayton's break-in attempt with date metadata. Forged power of attorney signatures on Medicare forms. Beckett placed a folder at the end of the table. IP trace report. The hearing aid device transmitted directly to a server registered to Sheffield Legal Associates. Not to Estelle's home network. To Grayson Sheffield's law office. Adelaide's smile was sharp. Attorney-client privilege doesn't cover conspiracy to commit fraud. In chess, they call it zugzwang, the position where your opponent must move, but every move worsens their position. We'd just arranged the board so that October 14th would be Grayson Sheffield's zugzwang moment. Critical advantage. Adelaide continued making notes. They don't know we have the audio file. They don't know about Beckett's IP trace. As far as Estelle and Grayson know, this is your word against theirs, elderly man, with supposed cognitive decline versus respected physician and estate attorney. October 14th, I said. 13 days. 13 days for us to prepare our presentation. Not enough time for them to realize what's coming, and build a counter-narrative. Adelaide looked up from her legal pad. They'll walk into that courtroom confident. By the time they understand what evidence we're holding, it'll be too late to adapt. Beckett was staring at the audio file transcript, his jaw tight. She told Lark that you were forgetting her, that you were getting confused about who she was. I know. While Lark was crying and saying you'd never forget her, Adelaide placed a hand on his shoulder. Which is exactly what the judge will hear, in Estelle's own voice. Documented, time-stamped, and irrefutable. We finished the inventory at noon. 13 pieces of evidence. 13 days until trial. The math felt appropriate. As we left Adelaide's office, Beckett asked how I'd stayed so calm through all of this. I looked at my car in the parking garage, thought about the Boeing tools still in the trunk, the same precision instruments I'd carried for 32 years. Some people panic when they find the fault in the system. Engineers just start planning the repair sequence. The repair sequence started with diagnosis. That's what I told myself during those 13 days. This was just another system failure requiring methodical correction. But at 7 a.m. on October 8th, Adelaide called with an edge in her voice that suggested the system was more damaged than we'd realized. I need you at my office. Now. I found something in Stanley's documents. I was there in 20 minutes. Adelaide had papers spread across her desk, and her face told me this wasn't minor. 2 Boeing patents, she said without preamble. Filed in your name between 2008 and 2011. Hydraulic valve systems. A European aerospace company has been negotiating to purchase them for 6 months. I stared at her. I assigned those to Boeing when I retired. You assigned manufacturing rights. You retained ownership and licensing authority. Standard for senior engineers. She pushed a contract across the desk. The buyer's offer is $280,000. The sale requires your signature as patent holder or your legal guardian's signature if you're declared incompetent. The number sat between us like a bomb. When's the deadline? November 1st, 2022. Suddenly, the entire timeline made sense. Stanley hadn't just wanted my estate. He'd needed guardianship before November 1st to sign my patents over and pocket $280,000. The surveillance, the medication tampering, the aggressive timeline, all calibrated to get Stanley appointed guardian before that deadline. Your estate is $1.05 million, Adelaide said quietly. Add the patents. Total stakes $1.33 million. I thought about the hearing aid planted in April, 6 months before November 1st. Exactly enough time to build a medical case file for guardianship and get appointed before the patent deadline. Does Estelle know about the patents? I'd assume so. Stanley would have needed her cooperation. Adelaide's desk phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID. It's the European company's legal department. She picked up, listening before putting them on hold. Her eyes locked on mine. They're asking about signature authorization timeline. Tell them the patents aren't for sale. She nodded and took them off hold. This is Adelaide Frost, representing Mr. Winslow. The patents are not currently available for purchase. Yes, I understand you've been in negotiations. Those negotiations were premature. Thank you. She hung up. Somewhere in Charlotte, I realized Estelle or Grayson Sheffield was probably getting a similar call and realizing their November deadline was slipping away. There's more, Adelaide said. Constance Fairbanks is downstairs. She has testimony about Stanley's history. Constance arrived carrying an accordion file that looked like it weighed 10 pounds. At 63, she moved with the careful precision of someone who'd spent decades on hospital floors. She sat across from Adelaide's desk. I worked at Meadowbrook Care Facility in 2019, she said. May through December. I was a floor nurse. That's when I met Helen Prescott. The name meant nothing for 3 seconds. Then it clicked. Stanley's mother. She was 82. Stanley had her placed under emergency guardianship in April 2019. He told the court she had advancing dementia and couldn't manage her finances, a $380,000 estate from her late husband's life insurance. I was assigned to her care floor. Constance opened the file. Inside were medical charts, medication logs, facility invoices. Helen's estate covered care costs initially, $4,200 monthly. But then I noticed irregularities in June. Her heart medication, she had atrial fibrillation, needed consistent anticoagulation, started coming up from the pharmacy differently. Same labels, but the pills looked wrong. I tested one. Constance's voice went flat. Placebo. Someone had replaced her heart medication with sugar pills. You reported it to the facility administrator, to Adult Protective Services, to anyone who would listen. A PS opened an investigation. But Helen died in November 2019, 7 months after Stanley got guardianship. Her estate was depleted to $22,000. The investigation concluded 3 months later. They found billing irregularities, but the statute of limitations had expired because Helen was deceased. Constance's hands started shaking as she held the medical records. Papers scattered across Adelaide's desk in a cascade of documentation. She stopped, closed her eyes, took a breath. When she opened them, they were wet. I watched Helen die, she said. I held her hand while her heart failed because someone had systematically removed the medication, keeping her alive. I couldn't prove it fast enough. Her voice broke. I won't watch it happen again. When I saw Stanley trying the same thing with you, when Lark told me about the surveillance and the pills, I knew. He'd done this before. Adelaide was taking notes. You have documentation, medical records, facility invoices showing estate depletion, pharmacy logs, and my testimony as a licensed nurse who witnessed the medication substitution. Constance looked at me directly. Stanley murdered his own mother for $380,000. He used the same playbook: emergency guardianship, isolation medication, tampering, systematic theft. The only difference is you had people who believed you fast enough to stop it. Stanley hadn't just planned my destruction. He'd already executed it successfully once before. This wasn't a first attempt, it was a proven method. Constance left at 10:30 a.m. with Adelaide's assurance her testimony would be entered. I was still processing Stanley had killed his own mother when my phone buzzed. Blocked number. Adelaide gestured for me to answer on speaker. Hello, Theodore. Estelle's voice came through smooth and confident. I wanted to reach out before Monday's hearing. We both know this is just theater. Stanley has 3 psychiatrists ready to testify and a spotless record. You have a son with a grudge and a neighbor with conspiracy theories. I'm calling because I genuinely want to avoid putting you through public humiliation. Withdraw the complaint. We'll forget this happened. I looked at Adelaide. She shook her head slightly. See you in court, Estelle. That's unfortunate. Her tone didn't change. Stanley built an airtight case. You won't win this, but I suppose you need to learn that yourself. She hung up. Adelaide set her pen down. She doesn't know about Constance, or the patents. They think they're walking into a competency hearing. They have no idea we're prosecuting a murder conspiracy. Adelaide's smile was cold. October 14th is going to be educational. Estelle's confidence on that Friday call wasn't just theater, it was strategy. She believed Stanley's case was bulletproof, believed Adelaide was outmatched, believed I would break before Monday. She was wrong on all 3 counts, but I wouldn't know that until the courthouse doors opened. 2 days later, on Thursday afternoon, my phone rang again. Estelle calling from her personal number this time. I answered without Adelaide on the line. Theodore, I wanted to speak with you privately before Monday. Her voice had a practiced warmth that made my skin crawl. I've been thinking about how difficult this must be for you. The confusion, the accusations flying around. It's overwhelming. I said nothing. Adelaide is competent, I'm sure. But Grayson has done this 70 times. He knows every judge in Mecklenburg County. He knows how these hearings go. She paused, letting that sink in. I'm calling because I genuinely believe there's a better path here. If you sign the guardianship papers voluntarily, Stanley can ensure you get excellent care. A nice facility close to family. You'd have visitors' activities, proper medical supervision. And if I don't, then Monday becomes very ugly. Grayson will present psychiatric evaluations, medical records, testimony from 3 healthcare professionals. The judge will appoint Stanley as guardian anyway, but you'll have fought the court. That goes in your file. Facilities look at that. They wonder if you're combative, difficult to manage. You end up somewhere far less comfortable. She waited for me to respond. I thought about my Boeing precision tools, how a properly calibrated instrument doesn't argue with faulty data. It just measures correctly and lets the numbers speak. Estelle's voice had the smoothness of a blade wrapped in silk, sharp underneath, but designed to feel like comfort. I hung up without a word. October 14th arrived clear and cold. Adelaide met me outside Mecklenburg County Courthouse at 8:30 a.m. carrying 2 banker's boxes of documentation. Beckett stood beside her, pale but steady. Inside the building smelled like floor polish and old wood, and the particular anxiety that courtrooms generate. Courtroom 5B was smaller than I'd expected. Judge Margaret Harlow presided, a stern woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She'd been on the bench for 15 years, Adelaide had told me, and didn't tolerate performance or manipulation. That would matter today. Grayson Sheffield sat at the petitioner's table looking exactly like what he was, an expensive estate attorney in a $3,000 suit who'd won this kind of hearing 69 times before. Stanley and Irene sat in the front row of the gallery, dressed like concerned family members. Estelle sat beside them in a navy dress that projected respectability and grief in equal measure. Clayson sat 2 rows back, avoiding my eyes. Judge Harlow called the hearing to order at 9 a.m. sharp. Grayson stood and delivered his opening statement with the polish of someone who'd given this speech dozens of times. Your Honor, this is a heartbreaking case. Theodore Winslow is a good man, a Boeing engineer who served this community with distinctions for over 30 years. But cognitive decline doesn't respect achievement or character. Mr. Winslow's family has watched him deteriorate over the past 18 months. Memory lapses, confusion about finances, paranoid accusations against family members. His son Stanley Prescott, a healthcare administrator at Mercy General, has exhausted every alternative. Emergency guardianship is the last resort, but it's necessary to protect Mr. Winslow from himself. He gestured to a stack of documents. We have psychiatric evaluations from 3 independent physicians, medical records documenting cognitive impairment, testimony from family members and neighbors. The evidence is overwhelming and tragic. Mr. Winslow poses a danger to himself and potentially others. He requires professional care he's currently refusing. Judge Harlow looked at Adelaide. Ms. Frost, you'll have your opportunity to cross-examine. Mr. Sheffield, call your first witness. The petitioner calls Clayton Prescott. My grandson walked to the witness stand like he was approaching an execution. He wouldn't look at me during the oath. Grayson led him through the testimony like a choreographed dance. Mr. Prescott, can you describe your grandfather's recent behavior? He's not himself anymore. Clayton's voice was flat, rehearsed. He forgets conversations we just had. He accused my father of stealing money that doesn't exist. Last month he called me at 2 a.m. asking why I hadn't picked him up from the airport. He hadn't been to the airport. He was confused. Does he manage his own finances? Not reliably. Bills go unpaid. He can't track his accounts. My father found 17 uncashed checks in his desk drawer. In your professional opinion, as his grandson, does Theodore Winslow require supervised care? Yes, he needs help, professional help. I watched Clayton recite his lies and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just the Boeing engineer's instinct that told me when a system was about to fail catastrophically. Every word he spoke had been written by someone else. Every pause, every gesture, every manufactured concern. Grayson had built a beautiful false narrative, and Clayton was delivering it perfectly. Estelle testified next. She cried on cue when describing how I'd forgotten Lark's birthday. She trembled when recounting the paranoid accusations I'd made about surveillance. Her voice broke when she talked about how much she loved her father, but couldn't keep him safe anymore. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Judge Harlow took notes, her expression unreadable. Grayson rested his case at 11:15 a.m. He returned to his seat with the satisfied posture of someone who'd just sealed a victory. Stanley leaned forward in the gallery, his face calm. Estelle dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Adelaide stood slowly, smoothed her jacket, and picked up the top file from her stack. She looked at Judge Harlow and said 5 words that made the air in the courtroom change. "I call Constance Fairbanks, Your Honor." Stanley's face drained of color so fast I thought he might faint. His hand shot out and gripped Irene's wrist hard enough that she gasped. Grayson's head whipped toward Stanley with a look of pure confusion. He had no idea who Constance Fairbanks was, or why that name had just turned his client white as chalk. But Stanley knew. And in that moment, watching him realize what was about to happen, I felt the system's calibration finally click into place. The courtroom doors opened, and Constance walked in, carrying the accordion file that held Stanley's mother's death certificate. Constance walked to the witness stand with her accordion file and spent 20 minutes methodically destroying Stanley's defense. Helen Prescott's placement at Meadowbrook in April 2019. The depleted estate. The replaced heart medication. The death 7 months later. She had documentation. She had medical records. She had watched Stanley kill his own mother using the exact playbook he'd tried to use on me. When she finished, Grayson Sheffield looked like a man watching his career end. Judge Harlow's expression had gone from neutral to cold. Adelaide placed a clear evidence bag on the witness stand. Inside it, the hearing aid Stanley had insisted I wear. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit C and call Thomas Reed as an expert witness." Thomas Reed was a compact man in his early 40s, with the careful demeanor of someone who spent his days examining code and circuit boards. Adelaide established his credentials quickly: 15 years in digital forensics, certified by the International Association of Computer Investigation, specialists' expert testimony in 43 cases. "Mr. Reed, did you examine the device in this evidence bag?" "I did, on October 9th. Can you describe what you found?" Reed pulled out photographs showing the hearing aid's disassembled components. "This device is marketed as a hearing aid, but that's cosmetic. The hearing amplification circuitry is minimal, barely functional. The bulk of the components serve a different purpose, which is surveillance. The device contains a high-sensitivity microphone, GPS tracker, 32 gigabyte storage, and cellular transmitter. It records audio continuously and transmits data wirelessly every 6 hours." The courtroom went silent. Judge Harlow stopped writing. "In your professional opinion, what is the primary function of this device?" "This is a surveillance device designed to look like a hearing aid. It tracked Mr. Winslow's location and recorded his conversations without his knowledge or consent." Adelaide let that sit. "Where did the recorded data transmit to?" Reed consulted his report. "IP address 198.51.100.47. Registered to Sheffield Legal Associates, 400 South Tryon Street, Charlotte." The IP address appeared on the courtroom monitor. Sheffield Legal Associates. Grayson Sheffield's law office. His office. Grayson's face went carefully blank. In the gallery, Stanley's breathing had gone shallow. Judge Harlow looked up. "Mr. Sheffield, did you have knowledge that your client was conducting electronic surveillance of the alleged incapacitated person?" Grayson stood slowly. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a brief recess to consult with my client." "Request denied. Answer the question." "I was not aware of the specific nature of the device." His voice had lost all its confidence. He knew exactly how this looked, attorney and client as co-conspirators in illegal wiretapping. Adelaide wasn't finished. Your Honor, I have one more piece of evidence. On September 29th, Theodore's granddaughter, Lark, was given a GPS safety watch. That watch has an audio recording feature that activates during SOS alerts. On that date, Lark triggered the SOS during what she'd been told was a coaching session with her mother. The watch recorded 28 minutes. With the court's permission, I'd like to play a 4-minute excerpt. Judge Harlow nodded. Proceed. Adelaide pressed play on a small speaker. Ambient sound, a room, someone breathing. Then Lark's voice came through small and tired. I don't want to practice anymore. My tummy hurts. Estelle's voice cold and patient. We've been over this, Lark. When the judge asks you about Grandpa, what do you say? That he forgets things. And that he scared me. Good. Now say it like you mean it. But Grandpa doesn't forget things. He remembers my birthday and what I like to eat and... Lark? Estelle's voice dropped to something sharp. You're being very difficult right now. We'll practice until you get it right. Even if that means staying up until midnight. Do you understand? A pause. Then Lark crying, yes, from the top. What do you tell the judge about Grandpa's memory? Lark's voice came out in a sob. He forgets things about me. He forgets my name sometimes. Better, keep going. The sobbing continued through the speaker. Prolonged, desperate, the sound of a child being systematically broken. Someone in the gallery whispered, "Oh God." Judge Harlow stared at Estelle with pure, focused contempt. I closed my eyes when Lark started crying on the recording, not because I couldn't bear it, but because I could finally breathe. For 9 months, they'd called me paranoid, delusional, confused. And now a courtroom full of people was hearing exactly what I'd been fighting against, documented in Estelle's own voice. Adelaide stopped the playback. The silence had weight. Your Honor, Adelaide said quietly. That recording is time-stamped September 29th at 3:27 p.m. It continues for 24 more minutes. Estelle Prescott coaches an 11-year-old child to commit perjury in this hearing. She threatens punishment if she refuses. She systematically trains Lark to present false testimony that would result in Theodore Winslow being declared incompetent. Judge Harlow set down her pen. When she spoke, her voice was quiet and lethal. Ms. Frost, I've heard enough. Mr. Sheffield, does your client wish to withdraw the petition? Grayson looked at Stanley. Stanley looked at Estelle. Estelle stared at her hands. Your Honor, I need to consult with... The petition is denied. Judge Harlow's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Theodore Winslow is clearly competent. This petition was filed in bad faith using fabricated evidence and illegal surveillance. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the Mecklenburg County District Attorney for criminal investigation. Charges should include conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, illegal electronic surveillance, and child endangerment. She looked directly at Stanley and Estelle. You should both retain criminal defense attorneys. Immediately, the judge called a 30-minute recess and instructed the bailiff to ensure the Prescotts remained in the building. As Stanley and Estelle stood, 2 Mecklenburg County Sheriff's deputies moved to the courtroom exits and took positions blocking the doors. Stanley looked at Grayson for help. His attorney was already packing his briefcase, moving with the quick efficiency of someone distancing himself from disaster. Adelaide touched my shoulder. It's over. I nodded. But I was watching Stanley's face as he realized the exits were blocked, as he understood the hunter had just become the prey, as 32 years of Boeing engineering precision finally clicked into perfect calibration. The system had failed, and I'd just finished the repair sequence. The 30-minute recess felt like 30 hours. Stanley and Estelle sat in the front row of the gallery, flanked by deputies, speaking to no one. Grayson Sheffield had disappeared, probably to call his malpractice insurance carrier. Adelaide used the time to organize her remaining exhibits with the methodical precision of someone building an airtight case. When court reconvened at 11:30, Constance Fairbanks was still on the stand. Adelaide held up a USB drive. Your Honor, I'd like to present video evidence. On September 15th, Ms. Fairbanks recorded footage from her doorbell camera showing Clayton Prescott breaking into Theodore Winslow's residence. Judge Harlow nodded. Proceed. The courtroom monitor lit up with grainy but clear footage. My front door. Clayton approaching with a key, looking over his shoulder, entering. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m. 17 minutes later, he emerged carrying nothing. Ms. Fairbanks, Adelaide said, what did you observe after this break-in? Theodore discovered documents he'd never seen before. Medical records showing missed appointments, unpaid bills with past due stamps, all planted to create evidence of incapacity. Constance's voice was steady. Clayton didn't just search the house. He falsified evidence to support the guardianship petition. Adelaide let that settle, then shifted. Ms. Fairbanks, please describe what you witnessed at Meadowbrook Rehabilitation in 2019 regarding Helen Prescott. Constance took a breath. I was a floor nurse when Helen Prescott was admitted under Stanley's guardianship in April. She was 82, cognitively intact, with a substantial estate from her late husband's insurance. Over 8 months, I watched that estate get drained through excessive facility fees, unnecessary treatments, questionable billing. Then in June, I noticed her heart medication looked different. I tested it. Placebos. Someone had systematically replaced her anticoagulants with sugar pills. What did you do? I reported it to the facility administrator and Adult Protective Services. A PS opened an investigation. But Helen died in November, 7 months after Stanley became her guardian. Her estate was depleted. The investigation concluded 3 months later with findings of billing irregularities, but the statute of limitations had expired because she was deceased. Stanley Prescott drained his mother's estate while systematically replacing her medication with placebos, and he got away with it. The courtroom was absolutely silent, and when you saw Stanley attempting guardianship of Theodore Winslow, I recognized the exact same pattern. The surveillance, the false medical claims, the timeline designed to gain control before anyone could stop it. He wasn't improvising, he was executing a proven method. Stanley stood suddenly in the gallery, his face flushed red. This is a lie, she's... Mr. Prescott, sit down immediately, or I'll have you removed from this courtroom. Judge Harlow's voice was ice. Stanley's shout echoed in the silent courtroom, not the sound of innocence protesting, but of a guilty man watching his carefully built lie collapse in real time. He sat slowly, his hands shaking. Adelaide thanked Constance and called her final witness. The defense calls Beckett Winslow. My son walked to the witness stand at 1 p.m. looking like he'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. The bailiff swore him in. Adelaide established his credentials: IT systems analyst, 15 years experience, expert in network security and digital forensics. Mr. Winslow, did you have contact with Estelle Prescott regarding your father's situation? Yes. She called me in July. Beckett's voice was steady but quiet. She said my father was declining rapidly and needed professional care. She asked me to convince him to sign guardianship papers voluntarily. She said if I didn't help, things would get very difficult for him. Did she elaborate on that threat? She said resistance would look bad to the court, that facilities wouldn't want to take him if he had a record of being combative. It was clearly a threat disguised as concern. Did you comply? Beckett looked at me and I saw the weight of guilt and shame in his eyes. I came to Charlotte in September to pressure him. I'm not proud of it. But when I heard the audio recording of Lark, when I actually heard my niece crying and being coached to lie, I realized what I'd been enabling. Adelaide handed him a document. Did you conduct a technical analysis of the hearing aid device? I did. I performed an IP trace on the wireless transmissions. Every 6 hours, the device transmitted encrypted data packets to IP address 198.51.100.47. That address is registered to Sheffield Legal Associates. The device wasn't sending surveillance data to Stanley or Estelle. It was sending it directly to their attorney's server. Real-time surveillance feeding straight to the lawyer building the case. Judge Harlow made a note. Grayson Sheffield, who'd returned during recess, looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. One more question, Mr. Winslow. Why did you decide to testify against your sister? Beckett looked across the courtroom at Estelle. She refused to meet his eyes. Because I heard my 11-year-old niece begging her mother not to make her lie anymore. Because I watched Estelle threaten a child with midnight coaching sessions if she didn't perform correctly. Because my father tried to tell me what was happening, and I didn't believe him. His voice broke slightly. I'm sorry it took me this long to see what you were doing. Estelle turned away, her jaw tight. Beckett stepped down from the witness stand and walked past the defense table. As he passed me, he placed his hand on my shoulder, a brief touch, warm and real and grounding. I covered it with my own hand for just a moment. 42 years of his life, and I'd forgotten how his touch felt. Adelaide stood. Your Honor, I have one final exhibit. She placed documents on the evidence table. These are patent transfer agreements for Theodore Winslow's 2 Boeing hydraulic valve patents, collectively valued at $280,000. They're dated November 2nd, 2022, 4 days from now. They bear Theodore's signature transferring ownership to Stanley Prescott as legal guardian. The signature is forged. Stanley had these documents prepared and ready to execute the moment he gained guardianship. He wasn't just planning to control my client's estate, he'd already prepared to steal $250,000 in intellectual property. Judge Harlow examined the documents carefully. She looked at Stanley with an expression that could have frozen water. I'm ready to rule. Judge Harlow set the forged patent documents aside and removed her reading glasses. The courtroom held its breath. But before she could speak, Adelaide stood. Your Honor, one additional matter. The LLC that purchased Theodore's home, I have Officer Reyes here with evidence seized under warrant. A uniformed deputy I had seen earlier in the proceedings stepped forward. Officer Miguel Reyes was in his mid-30s, built like someone who took physical fitness seriously, with the careful bearing of law enforcement, testifying in court. He carried an evidence envelope. Officer Reyes, Adelaide said, please tell the court what you discovered about Piedmont Holdings, LLC. Reyes opened the envelope and consulted a document. Piedmont Holdings, LLC was registered in North Carolina on September 1, 2022. The registered owner is Stanley Prescott. The LLC purchased Theodore Winslow's home at 2847 Elm Grove Drive for $850,000 on September 20th, 4 days before the guardianship petition was filed. The courtroom went silent. Stanley had used a shell company to buy my house. He'd planned this weeks before filing the guardianship petition, bought my home prepared to declare me incompetent, planned to drain my assets, and flip the property for profit. The entire scheme was elaborate real estate fraud with a guardianship wrapper. There's more, Adelaide said. Officer Reyes, please describe the communication you seized this morning. Reyes pulled out a printout. At 8:47 a.m. today, we executed a warrant to seize Grayson Sheffield's phone. We found this text message sent from Stanley Prescott's number at 6:32 a.m. Stay quiet. $50,000 when this is over. Grayson Sheffield stood so fast, his chair tipped backward. Your Honor, I had no knowledge of that message. I request immediate withdrawal from this case. Request denied. Judge Harlow's voice was steel. Sit down, Mr. Sheffield. You'll answer questions about that communication during the criminal investigation. Grayson sat. His face had gone from pale to gray. In the gallery, something broke. Clayton turned to Estelle, his voice rising. This was your plan. You said it was foolproof. You said Grayson had judges in his pocket. You broke into his house, Estelle hissed back. You coached Lark so badly, she triggered an SOS alert. This failed because you couldn't follow simple instructions. Both of you shut up. Stanley's voice was low and dangerous, but his hands were shaking. Clayton pointed at Estelle. Estelle pointed at Clayton. Stanley stared at the floor. The conspiracy died not with a bang, but with cowards blaming each other, each one desperate to save themselves by sacrificing the others. Judge Harlow let them implode for 10 seconds, then rapped her gavel once. The sound cracked through the courtroom like a gunshot. Enough. She looked at each of them in turn, Stanley, Estelle, Clayton, Grayson, with an expression of pure judicial contempt. Then she put her glasses back on and consulted her notes. I've been on this bench for 15 years. I've seen difficult guardianship cases, contentious family disputes, genuine medical crises, requiring emergency intervention. This is not one of those cases. Her voice was measured, precise, final. The petition for emergency guardianship is denied. Theodore Winslow has demonstrated complete mental competency throughout these proceedings. He answered questions coherently, provided detailed testimony, and clearly understands his financial and medical affairs. She looked at Stanley and Estelle. What I've witnessed here is not a concerned family trying to protect a declining relative. What I've witnessed is a criminal conspiracy involving illegal surveillance, falsified evidence, child abuse, attempted fraud, and obstruction of justice. Adelaide had her pen ready, taking notes. This matter is being referred to the Mecklenburg County District Attorney for criminal investigation and prosecution. The charges should include conspiracy to commit elder abuse, illegal electronic surveillance under North Carolina Statute 15-287, attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person, money laundering through the establishment of a fraudulent LLC, obstruction of justice, child endangerment, and perjury. Stanley's face had gone from red to ashen. Irene gripped his arm. I'm issuing immediate restraining orders. Stanley Prescott, Estelle. Prescott, Clayton Prescott, and Irene Prescott are barred from any contact with Theodore Winslow or his property. No phone calls, no emails, no third-party communications. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Judge Harlow paused, and when she spoke again, her voice had shifted, still firm, but carrying something that sounded like protective fury. Regarding Lark Prescott, age 8. This court has heard audio evidence of systematic psychological abuse conducted by her mother, Wu, for the purpose of manufacturing false testimony. I am referring this matter immediately to Child Protective Services and the Mecklenburg County Family Court for an emergency custody evaluation. Given the documented evidence of child endangerment presented today, I am issuing an emergency order directing CPS to conduct an expedited home assessment within 48 hours. Until a family court judge rules on the custody matter, Estelle Prescott is prohibited from using Lark as a witness or involving her in any legal proceedings related to this case. Mr. Winslow. I strongly recommend you consult with a family law attorney immediately. Based on what this court has seen today, I will be submitting a formal referral to family court recommending temporary placement with you pending the full custody hearing. The man they'd tried to declare incompetent now had a judge's formal referral protecting the child they'd abused. Complete role reversal. The justice that mattered wasn't instantaneous. It was building piece by piece the way any solid structure does. Estelle made a sound, half gasp, half sob. You can't. She's my daughter. You coached your daughter to commit perjury. You subjected her to months of psychological torture. You used an 11-year-old child as a weapon in a financial crime. Judge Harlow's voice was absolute. You're fortunate I'm only suspending your rights and not terminating them outright. That decision will come later, depending on what the criminal investigation reveals. She closed her file. This hearing is concluded. Bailiff, please ensure the restraining order terms are clearly communicated to the Prescott family. As the bailiff read the formal order, Stanley and Estelle sat rigid in the gallery, not looking at each other. Grayson Sheffield closed his briefcase quietly and walked to the exit without a word to his clients. Adelaide leaned close to me. Detective Morrison from Mecklenburg County is waiting outside. The DA moved fast. Arrest warrants were issued this morning, based on the evidence package we submitted Monday. They'll be taken into custody when they leave the building. I nodded. I didn't need to watch it happen. I already knew how it ended. 20 minutes later, as Beckett and I walked to the parking garage, I saw two sheriff's deputies escorting Stanley and Estelle toward a waiting patrol car at the courthouse side entrance. Stanley's hands were cuffed behind his back. Estelle's wrists looked too thin in the metal restraints. Neither of them looked up. The criminal case had begun the moment the civil case ended. 3 days after the verdict, I watched the morning news while making Lark's breakfast. The anchor reported in a professionally neutral voice, "Prominent Charlotte estate attorney Grayson Sheffield has had his law license suspended pending criminal investigation." I turned off the television and focused on scrambled eggs, no peppers, exactly how Lark preferred them. Toast cut diagonally. Orange juice in the glass with the blue rim, never the green one. Routine mattered now. Stability mattered. Adelaide called on November 1st while Lark was at school. Clayton was arraigned this morning. Breaking and entering evidence tampering conspiracy. His attorney is pushing for a plea deal, but the DA is talking 2 to 3 years minimum. Clayton's claiming his mother coerced him. Estelle's claiming Clayton acted independently. They're eating each other alive. And Stanley denied bail. Elder abuse, money laundering, conspiracy, obstruction. Flight risk. He'll await trial in custody, could be 18 months. I thought about Stanley sitting in a cell, wondering if that was justice or just more wreckage. Lorraine would have had an answer. I didn't. Irene's under investigation as an accessory, Adelaide continued. She signed documents for the LLC. Whether she knew the full scope or just followed Stanley's instructions will determine her culpability. Estelle, Adelaide's voice went flat. Her family released a statement distancing themselves. When they learned your estate wasn't being split among them, they stopped returning her calls. Her brother gave an interview saying he'd always had concerns about her judgment. They had sat in my kitchen talking about what was best for everyone, expecting a financial windfall from my supposed incompetence. When the inheritance evaporated, they abandoned Estelle like she was contaminated. It had never been about family, only money. Her job, pharmaceutical company, fired her. Criminal investigation, ethics violation. She's facing charges, professional exile, and complete family abandonment simultaneously. Watching the Prescott's empire collapse felt like a controlled demolition. I'd set the charges by refusing to lie. Adelaide had pressed the button. Each structure fell in sequence: Grayson's law license, Clayton's freedom, Stanley's empire, Estelle's career. Precise, methodical, total. "How's Lark?" Adelaide asked, her voice softening. "Seeing Dr. Brennan twice a week. Court-ordered therapy. She's handling it better than I expected. Routine helps." "You're doing good work, Theodore." I wasn't sure about that. I was just making breakfast and checking homework, trying not to think about how Lorraine should be doing this instead of me. November moved forward with the slow steadiness of someone learning to walk after an injury. Lark went to school. I made her breakfast every morning. She did homework at the kitchen table while I worked on Boeing consulting projects. Dr. Brennan said children with stable support systems healed remarkably well after trauma. I took her word for it. One afternoon, Lark asked if she could water Lorraine's garden. We went outside together. The rose bush was still blooming, deep red flowers smelling of honey and earth. Lark filled the watering can and moved methodically between the plants, her small hands careful and deliberate. I understood then that healing wouldn't be dramatic, just daily and deliberate. Small hands on a watering can. Eggs cooked exactly right. Homework checked every evening. Grandpa Theodore. She stood by the rosebush, watering can still in hand. Did pushing the button help? Did it stop the bad things? I knelt to her eye level. It helped more than anything else. You told the truth when it was very hard. You were braver than most adults I know. She nodded, then looked back at the roses. Grandma Lorraine's roses looked thirsty. She watered them until the soil was dark and damp. That evening, Beckett called. Dad, I found Mom's garden notebook. She had plans for the back section sketches of what she wanted to plant before she got sick. Could we work on it together? You, me, Lark. I looked out at Lorraine's garden in the dark. 3 years gone. 42 years of distance with my son. So much time wasted on small silences. Yes, I said, come next Saturday. Bring the notebook. And for the first time in 40 years, I meant it without reservation. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. I was making coffee when Beckett's truck pulled into the driveway at 8:30. He climbed out carrying Lorraine's garden notebook, 2 flats of perennials, and something I hadn't expected, a large suitcase. I took a month of leave, he said, when I opened the door. First time off in 15 years. I thought if it's okay with you, I could stay. With Lark, with the garden, with whatever needs doing. I looked at my son standing on my doorstep, asking permission to stay in his childhood home. The distance between us had calcified over 42 years. But calcification could be broken. Your room's still upstairs, I said. Same as it was. We planted Lorraine's garden together that morning. The section she'd sketched 3 months before her cancer diagnosis. Black-eyed Susans along the back fence. Coneflowers in the middle ground. Low sedum for the border. Lark helped her small hands patting soil around the roots with surprising gentleness. Beckett read from Lorraine's notes, plant in groups of 3. Odd numbers look more natural than even. She was right about everything, Beckett said quietly. She was right about you, I replied. Said you'd come back eventually. Said you just needed time to figure out what mattered. He didn't answer, just kept planting. After lunch, we moved to the workshop. The dining room chair had been sitting there since 2012, the one Lorraine had asked me to fix, the one I'd said I'd get to next weekend for 10 years running. The dowel joints were loose, the finish scratched one leg shorter than the others by 1/8 of an inch. Beckett ran his hand over the scarred wood. Mom asked you to fix this in October 2012. October 14th. She served pot roast, the chair wobbled. I said I'd fix it that weekend. But you didn't. I kept saying next weekend. I thought there was always time. Beckett picked up the wood glue. I do that too. Put off things that matter. Then suddenly there isn't time anymore. I put Miles Davis on the old radio, Kind of Blue, the album playing the day Beckett was born. The trumpet filled the workshop with sound that felt like memory made audible. Beckett disassembled the chair joints while I prepared the clamps. When he asked about torque for the dowel pins, I handed him the wrench that had belonged to my father, then to me. That wrench in Beckett's hand felt like inheritance finally delivered 40 years late, but still worth the wait. I watched his hands move the way mine did, the way my father's had careful, deliberate checking the fit twice before committing. You're tightening it right, I said. Your grandfather taught me that way. Now you know it too. Beckett looked at the wrench, then at me. Like you. Like us, I corrected. We worked until the chair was solid again, joints tight, legs even. It would outlast me now. Probably outlast Beckett. That felt right. Tuesday afternoon, Reg arrived for chess, the first game since the trial. He set up the board in silence, the way we'd done for 30 years. After 7 moves, he leaned back. I need to confess something. When I testified, you win 2 out of 3 games. That was inaccurate. You actually win 7 out of 10. Strategic perjury in defense of my neighbor. I stared at him. Then I started laughing, Real laughter, deep and honest. You committed perjury to make me look stupider. I committed friendship. Reg grinned. There's a difference. Through the window I saw Lark running in the garden. Arms out, head back, moving like a child who'd forgotten to be afraid. The GPS watch was still on her wrist, but it wasn't recording anything anymore. Just a watch on a free girl's wrist, tracking nothing but the ordinary coordinates of childhood. Check, Reg said, moving his queen. Mate in 4, I replied. That evening I found Beckett finishing the chair's final coat of varnish in the workshop. He looked up. Dad, I was thinking maybe I could work remote from Charlotte for a while. My company's flexible, if that's okay with you. I picked up the second brush, the one Lorraine had used the last time we refinished furniture together back when we thought we had decades left. Let's start with the chair legs, I said. We finished varnishing the chair on Wednesday. By Friday, it was back in the dining room, Lorraine's seat for 38 years. Now it was solid. 10 years late, but solid. Beckett moved his laptop to the guest room that weekend, unpacked completely, and set up monitors on the desk where he'd done high school homework. Monday morning, I heard him tell his Atlanta office he'd be working remotely from Charlotte indefinitely. Not temporarily. Indefinitely. 3 weeks into December, Lark and I were trimming the last of Lorraine's perennials in golden afternoon light. She wore her coat garden gloves 2 sizes too big, and the GPS watch on her wrist. She'd been working quietly for 10 minutes when she stopped mid-cut and looked up. Grandpa Theodore, does my mom still love me? I set down my pruning shears and knelt to her eye level. Why do you ask that, sweetheart? Because I pushed the button and it recorded her saying the bad things. Now she can't see me and she's in trouble with the police. Lark's face was serious, not crying, just trying to understand cause and effect. So maybe she doesn't love me anymore because I got her in trouble. I chose the simplest truth I knew. Lark, people who truly love you don't ask you to lie to hurt someone else. They don't make you practice until midnight. Whatever your mom feels right now, she has to figure that out herself. You didn't get her in trouble. She got herself in trouble by doing wrong things. Lark studied my face. Do you still love her even though she did bad things? She'll always be my daughter. But love isn't the same as allowing harm. I love the person she could have been. I'm sad about the person she chose to be. Both things can be true at once. She nodded slowly, then picked up her scissors. Which flowers should I cut next? It was the smartest question I'd heard all year. Not dwelling on what couldn't be changed, not spiraling into guilt she didn't earn, just moving forward to the next task. Children are resilient in ways adults forget how to be. The coneflowers on the left, I said, 4 inches from the ground. We worked until the sun dropped and the temperature fell. Lark's cheeks were pink from cold, her gloves dirty. She looked healthy and normal, exactly like a child should look after an afternoon of useful work. That night, after Lark was asleep, I went to my bedroom and opened the cabinet drawer where I'd stored the evidence. The hearing aid sat in its clear bag, case number tag still attached. I placed it on the corner of my cabinet next to Lorraine's framed photograph. The picture was from our 25th anniversary. She was 53, smiling at something beyond the camera's frame eyes, bright with the particular light that comes from being genuinely happy. I touched the frame gently. You were right, Lorraine. I should have trusted the signs earlier. But you knew I'd figure it out eventually. You always said I was stubborn, but not stupid. She smiled back, unchanging. Beckett came back. He's staying through Christmas. Fixed your chair, planted your garden exactly how you drew it. I paused. Thought you'd want to know. The hearing aid rested beside her photograph, the weapon they'd used to spy on me, now sitting next to the woman I'd loved most. The tool of harm had become proof of survival. I turned off the light and stood in the dark hallway. Beckett's voice drifted from down the hall, talking to Lark, who'd gotten up for water. "Do you have everything ready for school? Pencils, notebooks?" "I need the ones with the blue covers," Lark answered. "Blue is better for math." "Blue it is. We'll get them this weekend." The sound of a child planning a future instead of surviving a present. I understood then what Lorraine had always known: family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when the worst happens. It's who stays when staying is hard. It's who buys blue notebooks because blue is better for math. Beckett walked Lark back to her room. Her door closed softly. Then he paused outside mine. "Dad, you still awake?" "Yeah, I'm awake." "Good night." "Good night, son." Simple words, but they meant everything. The next morning, those simple words still echoed. "Good night, son." "Good night, Dad." 42 years to get back to something that simple, but we'd arrived. December 28th arrived cold and clear. I woke to the smell of coffee Beckett was already making downstairs. 6:30 in the morning, 3 days before the new year. I dressed and came down to find Lark at the kitchen table with colored pencils spread across the surface, drawing careful pictures of the garden on white paper. "What are you working on?" I asked. She held up a drawing, black-eyed Susans in yellow and brown, surprisingly accurate for an 11-year-old. "I'm making a book of all the flowers we planted, so I remember them when they grow back." "That's a good idea. Your grandmother kept notebooks like that." "I know. Beckett showed me." She went back to coloring her tongue between her teeth in concentration. I moved to the window overlooking Lorraine's garden. Morning mist hung low over the beds we'd prepared for winter. The perennials were cut back to ground level. The rose bush was wrapped in burlap against the frost. Everything looked dormant, finished waiting. But underneath the roots were alive. The bulbs we'd planted in November were already preparing flowers we wouldn't see until March. The garden in winter looked like grief stripped down and waiting. But underneath the roots were planning spring. Beckett appeared beside me with a coffee mug and set it on the windowsill without speaking. I picked it up and took a sip. Black coffee, 2 sugars. Exactly right. "You remembered?" I said. He looked puzzled. "Remembered what?" "How I take my coffee." "Dad, you've been drinking it that way my entire life." "Of course I remember." But Estelle never had. In 42 years, my daughter had never learned how I took my coffee. She'd never needed to care requires attention, and attention requires caring enough to look. Beckett had watched. He'd learned. He'd remembered. That was the difference. "Thank you," I said. He nodded and stood beside me, both of us looking out at the garden. We didn't need more words than that. Lark finished her drawing and came to stand on my other side, slipping her small hand into mine. Her fingers were warm. The 3 of us stood at the window together, the son who'd found his courage, the granddaughter who'd found her voice, and the man who'd spent 74 years learning what family actually meant. "Can we plant more flowers in spring?" Lark asked. "We'll plant everything your grandmother had in that notebook," I said. "Every single flower she designed." "Will there be room?" "We'll make room." Through the window, the sun rose over the back fence. Golden light touched the wrapped rosebush, then spread across the dormant beds. The garden looked different in morning light, not dead, just resting. Not finished, just pausing between seasons. "I'm glad we're here," Lark said quietly. "Me too," Beckett said. I squeezed her hand. "Me too, sweetheart." Reg would arrive for chess Tuesday. Constance Fairbanks would bring her famous pot roast Thursday. Adelaide would call Friday with criminal trial updates, Stanley and Estelle facing years in prison. Grayson Sheffield disbarred. The consequences were still cascading, but they were no longer my problem to solve. The sun cleared the roofline, and caught Lorraine's rosebush turning the burlap wrap golden in the early light. Lark squeezed my hand. Beckett's shoulder touched mine. Family is not the people who share your name, not the ones who inherit your estate. Family is the ones who stand beside you when the light comes back. Outside, a cardinal landed on the rosebush and sang. Inside, we stood in Lorraine's kitchen and let the morning find us, together. And to you listening to my story, remember this: the people who truly love you will never ask you to doubt yourself for their benefit. For months, I questioned my own mind. I wondered if I was being paranoid, if age had made me suspicious and untrusting. Don't make my mistake. Don't let someone else's lies become your self-doubt. When something feels wrong, trust that instinct. I almost waited too long, almost believed their version of me instead of my own truth. Your clarity is your greatest defense. I've learned that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who stays when storms come. These family stories, revenge moments, taught me that protecting your legacy sometimes means protecting it from relatives. God placed the right people in my path when I needed them: my son who came back, my neighbor who believed me. Family drama revenge isn't about hatred. It's about justice. In family stories, revenge situations, truth is your strongest weapon. When family drama revenge becomes necessary, document everything and stay calm. These family drama revenge experiences taught me that justice will prevail when you stand firm in truth. If my story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment telling me what you think. Did I do the right thing? Would you have fought back the same way? Subscribe to Dad. Family Revenge for more true stories about standing up for what's right, no matter who tries to take it from you. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. One final reminder: some details in this story have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, but the core message about protecting yourself and those you love remains true. God bless you all.